from YouTube will fade out in the background. What is up, chat gang? Welcome. I guess welcome back. Welcome back to RantCast. I don't know where y'all have went for one entire calendar year, but I was certainly making the show still in the Shadow Realm. No, I wasn't. I'm out of practice, and it is the perfect time to bring in one of somebody that I get fame skittish around, like I'm a little overwhelmed with. But so yeah, we'll impress Dan Drambles here, the progenitor, the creator of filmmaker and creator of Wholesome Halloween, as well as a lot of other stuff. Dan, why don't you say who you are? And
okay, I feel like you've overhyped us with the e-celeb status because I'm very, small beans in the grand scale of things. But I am Dan Drambles. I'm a YouTuber. I used to be very popular when it was negative, and then I decided that was soul crushing and decided to actually pursue passions. And then my algorithm priority just dipped massively. But I am happier now. So I mostly, as you've already mentioned, the primary thing I do at the minute is Wholesome Halloween, which is a big 31-day video essay marathon on a different horror movie every single day throughout the entirety of October to celebrate the Halloween season. And this year is my last one. And so, with it being a big sort of blowout finale, I'm deciding to do the whole thing for charity. So all of my Patreon money for this month, ad revenue for this month, any shirt sales I make, and any donations that viewers give will go directly to Trans Lifeline. And just on donations alone, before I've even calculated up the shirt sales, which have also been pretty good, we've already broke over 1,000, and I was only setting it at a target of $200. Sorry, I'm British. I don't know if you can tell by the accent.
You are?
It's seamless. It's seamless. Well, to be fair, you say you are, it's surprising, but having spoke to anybody outside of England, I always get Irish, Scottish, New Zealand, Welsh, yeah. Anything, everybody guesses anybody but anything but English. But yeah, so that's currently ongoing. We've got another one dropping in 2 hours and 50 minutes based on the current time.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I'll have a premiere on that. So if you want to drop in the chat and say hi, I will be there. And that's the current big project, and it's going very well. We absolutely smashed that £200 target. So now the target's at 1,500. And then I'm also I work with Creator VC currently, which is kind of mind blowing because that's a recent development. For those of you who don't know who Creator VC are, they are the massive company behind the literally multi-million-dollar franchise that is In Search of Darkness. And I am currently a development producer on the first ever spin-off of that series. The series is considered the definitive 80s horror documentary. It's currently streaming on Shudder. It's 14 hours of film, all covering 80s horror.
Right now. Yeah.
It is awesome. I loved it. I mean, I'm not just saying that because I work for them, because I loved it before I worked for them, and it kind of ended up that I work for them. So yeah, so I'm a development producer with them right now, and I am developing the very first spin-off of that series, which is going to be on horror video games. I'm very excited about that.
I suspect a lot of our conversation is going to revolve around the horror video games because I know Twitch is the video game platform, and I usually have my own horror marathon here on Twitch. Its name has changed, colloquially Mephtober is the one that kind of sticks, but last year I called it Hopeful Halloween, totally shamelessly referencing and ripping you off with your Wholesome Halloween.
I appreciate the homage. You know how many rip-offs of Friday the 13th came out and then ended up doing better than it. That's all great.
I think horror as a genre handles, what's the difference between homage and ripoff, whether I like it or not, is the the gag. But I think horror as a genre respects the ripoff / homage dynamic a little bit more because it is, I think it's a more intimate genre, especially it's its kind of roots and stuff like that.
But, well, the whole thing of everything's a horror remake now, and people getting angry about oh god, has nobody got original ideas? And horror, more than any other genre, is one of the ones that's remade and more and more and more. You know, we've got so many. We've got a remake of Halloween. We've got a remake of Friday the 13th. We've got a remake of Nightmare on Elm Street. We've got
New Candyman was
remakes of
dope as hell.
yeah, I got remakes of Valentine's Day and just a whole bunch of stuff. So that's not a new thing. That stems back to the literal very first horror movie. The very first horror movie and the second horror movie are both the same movie. The second horror movie ever is a remake of the first horror movie ever.
So what was the first horror movie, out of curiosity?
Le Château de Haunt, which is a 19. Wait, no, maybe that's the remake. I'm like racking
Chat gang
my
can look
like
it up for us real
horror
fast.
trivia brain. Okay, so it's a 1936 movie, or it's a 1935 movie, and the second one's 1936. But yeah, the director made it, and then a year later he remade it again, but with a slight tint of color because they introduced manual coloring of film. The first one's in black and white. So yeah, so both the first horror movie and then the second horror movie, you know, same movie. One's a remake.
Literally colorized. That's interesting. Yeah, no, I don't want to ruin anyone's day who might be stumbling into chat gang here or watching back on the VODs, but my education, or as uni as they call it across the pond, I majored in English Lit. My first 200 level course was called Analyzing Texts. What's a text? Everything's a text. Okay, that's blah. And the very first day, my professor looks at me and says, "You will never tell an original story in your life."
Oh, I agree with you, Professor.
like,
There's no such thing.
And he's like, and this class is going to teach you why. And so we go on to essentially break down every text we read into, you know, and the exact sort of thing that makes you not love literature, right? And I found it very liberating personally, because it's like you're always worried about being an original. You're worried about telling something that nobody's ever heard before, right? And in that moment, I realized that like the pressure was off. I didn't need to tell anything new, so I just tell stories my way. And I always found that very liberating. And chat gang, I knew it came through with it. Look,
yeah, I just saw Le Manoir de Diable is the original. The remake is Le Château de Haunt a year later, and I was way off with the years. It's just because I think I'm referring to a film I'm talking about horror films so much at the minute that the dates are getting scrambled in my head. I am reviewing, I think, a 1936 movie at some point this month. But yeah, Le Manoir de Diable was 1896, and then 1897 we'll get the remake, and that is Le Château de Haunt.
I mean, spoilers.
But I'm not reviewing those movies, so I'm just reviewing a very early horror film.
You narrowed things down to a single year. Disgusting.
Well, to be fair, in that single year, there's like 2 horror films came out. Like horror was very much in its early inception, so you probably could work it out if you wanted to.
Well, I mean, I think we've sort of like understood that horror essentially started with what Mary Shelley was like. That was what we call the first horror story, right? And I would posit we had cave paintings of things trying to terrify people further back, like here's a saber-toothed tiger eating your neighbor, right? Like, but that gets into the whole like esoteric of what is even horror. And right, like, is some horror's funny, some horror's not. Some horror, is a documentary horror, probably not. I think we agree that it's got to be fiction. It's a whole thing. But I'm not interested in splitting hairs in regards to that. But you and I share and I think this is why I love your content so much. In addition to giving the middle finger to the algorithm, which essentially rewards negativity.
Yeah.
See, I mental health visibility, I have to remind myself. Chat gang knows that I've been no stranger to depression and all that stuff, and was recently diagnosed with bipolar 2, which is why I have my big hiatus here. I cannot give in to the negativity. Like I physically cannot, because if I do, I go into some really dark places. So I like aggressively lean against like negativity. I have to. Bit of a hope punk. I wish we had a better word for it, but I'm a bit of a hope punk.
Hope. I like hope punk. I'm gonna use hope punk.
Yeah,
I'm gonna adopt that. I've never
yeah,
heard that before.
yeah, yeah,
Like cyberpunk, but for hope. I like
yeah.
it.
Well, it's well, like I feel like in the state of the world being what it is, you know, that having hope is more rebellious than a middle finger, you
Mm,
know, and having empathy is its own form of revolt. You know, it's just maybe in
radical
a
kindness.
yeah, you know, yeah, exactly, radical kindness, and you're like doing a flip on the skateboard, and there's like a rainbow behind you. Yeah, it's yeah, so it's but I believe like all fiction gives us a like sort of a safe space to interrogate our thoughts and ideas, and horror in particular gives us a safe space to interrogate the ickier thoughts and ideas. And what makes, don't get me wrong, I can revel a nice schlock piece of horror, but I think the best horror often comes from a place of empathy. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that it's a like a happy ending or anything like that, but like off the top of my mind, Doctor Sleep versus the original Shining, right?
Yeah.
Um, like Doctor Sleep, was it Flanagan? Mike
Yeah,
Flanagan?
it's Mike Flanagan. It is
Mike
Mike
Flanagan.
Flanagan.
I think for the most part, with the exception of like Ouija, I don't think, I think he's got all bangers, like just like all hits, no misses.
He didn't make the third Ouija film. He made the second, and
Yeah,
the
he
second
made
one's
the
pretty good.
okay, and Hush was excellent. I think it's
Hush is awesome.
yeah. We just have 2 hours of rattling off our favorite horror films.
Yeah. Is
Strap
my
in,
video?
Jackie.
I went to say, I'm spoiling it now, but I went to say I've just done a video on Hush, but I actually am so video overloaded. I actually don't know if that one's out yet, so you'll have to tell me. But maybe, if not, there's a video on Hush coming up. If it's already out, it's there. But yeah.
Yeah, no, the gripping tension of Mike Flanagan's Hush 3 days ago. See,
Look at me
I
being on top of things.
yeah, no, that's me. Look at me, producer and podcaster. No, I left off on Creep, and I like to store up a few of your videos because then I just binge like 3 or 4 of them
Mhm.
at once. So now it's about time. Oh, Paul, you got Pulse on here too. Oh, and The Descent, all great hits.
The
But yeah,
Pulse video is one of my favorite ones I did this month.
Pulse. Oh, that's right here. Post a note of videos to rewatch or ones that I haven't watched before with the little star.
Nice.
Keep it right here. Just I'm like, okay, I gotta. Horror of Dracula, 1958. Haven't watched it yet. That's why it's got the asterisk. Um, and Cat People. So I've got my list here of films that I need to rewatch, this is the desk of a horror junkie. But no, back to the resetting the point is Mike Flanagan. I think he's especially adept at telling horror stories from a place of empathy. Uh,
Totally.
and I think in particular, like a Doctor Sleep really jumps out because of Rose with the Hat. He has
Yeah.
empathy for the monster in that film.
Oh yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, it's same with Haunting Hill House. It's almost spoilers to say like he's got empathy for the ghost, but there's a lot of empathy for one of the ghosts at least.
Yeah.
Like he's and it's a lot. You know, there's a lot of his voice in that as well because obviously, if you read the book Haunting Hill House, it is almost nothing like the show, like almost nothing at all.
Mhm.
You can see whether he's kind of adopted core ideas and little bits and bobs, but it's a very very different beast. And yeah, he's one of these guys that just fully embraces horror as a platform and a medium through which to tell tales of like the strength of the human condition and the willpower of people to kind of fight against the worst things you can come up against and just explore like the deep empathy of humanity through terror. And that's always been the thing that's interested me with horror. It's always about like I always go point to the Wes Craven quote, which was something like horror doesn't create fear, horror is a release of fear. And it's like it's about giving you that kind of safe space to kind of run head first into like the things that are the most difficult for me. it's a genre that is the most honest more than anything. Because, you know, like, I'm not saying like all dramas are Hallmark movies, but with movies outside of the horror genre, there is a tendency to, you know, push for like brave acts of heroism, crazy scale, or, you know, and I don't just mean crazy scale in the sense of like Lord of the Rings scale, but like with drama, the emotions are like up here. You know,
There's a
you watch something like,
melodrama to it, right?
yeah,
Like
yeah,
there's
yeah.
such a
Whereas like horror as a genre is kind of, but yeah, within those genres as well, there's like things like that you can be emotional, but you still don't get to talk about the particularly dark stuff or the particularly shady stuff. And I feel like horror is like kind of honest in that it sort of acknowledges that there's stuff that's bleak in the world and there's stuff that's horrible in the world, and it engages with the kind of subjects and texts that other genres don't necessarily. But then it's still sort of the good ones anyway, that have a capacity of like, when they hold your hand through the dark, they can show you the light at the end of it. And I've always appreciated that.
well. Train to Busan literally does that, right? They walk through a damn tunnel holding hands. That just conjured that image into my. But yeah, like it's that interrogating the icky thoughts, you know,
Mhm.
that you just the best. Like obviously, you know, every genre, every artistic medium, they all have their bad actors. They all have their good and their bad. Um, Horror's even kind of good at reveling in the bad stuff. You know, like it's just
Oh
like
yeah,
when it
it's the pizza thing. Like, you know, there's no such thing as bad pizza. There's no such thing as a bad horror. Although, having said that, I have celiac, so there's such a thing as bad pizza for me. But that's besides the point. You get the metaphor.
oh god, the 1% that has celiac disease. I'm so
Yep.
sorry. Okay, this
Diagnosed
shirt
with it
is
last
it's
December.
I see wrestling. It's got to be
It
on
is
your
wrestling. It's the
I've been
New
trying
Days, when they did the Black Lives Matter shit.
metal.
So it's Kofi and Big E raising their fists in the ring, with a
Yeah,
lot of names of black victims of police violence in the background,
it's amazing.
which is a bit of a bleak thing to say, but it, you know, the shit went for a good cause and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a great bit of a wrestling stand too. I'm starting to notice these weird Venn diagrams of horror fans who like wrestling. You know, I'm like,
Well, horror and wrestling are kindred spirits, and I mean, to spoil
there's
probably the biggest video this month.
there's a
It
whole lucha libre horror subgenre out of Mexico.
Yeah,
A whole
yeah.
yeah. Go on. Sorry, not to derail
But
you.
yeah, to spoil a video I'm doing this month, there will be a video on the Venn diagram crossover of horror and wrestling.
Awesome. I can't wait for it. No, I do need to address chat here. Obviously, the scariest thing of all time is work. Agreed,
Mm-hmm.
Demir. But Demir dropped 1,000 RDP, which is like our little channel points here you accrue from watching the show live. And that reminds everyone that Chat Gang ain't nothing to fuck with. So thank you for showing back up, Demir, and reminding everybody. Yeah, it's yeah. And to answer the question, yes, this is a rant cast again. Have a good day at work, Tomb Dad. Yeah. So I'll get the thought back. You know, I called my show Rantcast, and I went undiagnosed with ADHD. And I sometimes when I'm like standing in reality, I'll go, the show's called Rantcast. And I'll just like put my hand on my face and go, the show's called Rantcast. And it's a reminder to myself that like, how did I not know about this? And like kind of like laugh about it. Like look at this giant, like if it was a neon sign above my head that said ADHD is what I
Yeah,
called
well,
my
I mean,
show.
I have autism, as we spoke about off camera. Like, I'm diagnosed autistic, and Dan Drambles is a portmanteau of Dan Rambles, because I have a tendency on my special interests to ramble.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you know, I've literally made an entire channel now dedicated to hundreds of hours of me rambling about special interests. And it's like, again, it's like, feel like that was a telltale sign when you name your channel after the fact that you ramble about special interests too much. And yet I didn't know. My mom did. Apparently I was diagnosed as a child and I was not informed, and then got diagnosed as an adult and turned around to her and was like, hey, did you know I was autistic? And she was like, oh, I've got diagnosed as autistic. And they were like, and she was like, well, yeah. And I was like, what do you mean? Well, yeah. And she's like, well, you got diagnosed when you were like 2 or something. And I was like, you didn't tell me that. There's a whole story behind that, though. It wasn't on my medical record for reasons, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. It's a crazy story.
Yeah, that's I mean, I think part of it's our relationship with mental health has changed in this generation too a little bit. And I think
Yeah.
this aggressively looking for silver linings, aggressively finding hope in things, like I think that's the one thing that did come out of COVID, like quarantine lockdown, was people stopped to take stock of their mental health in a way that just culturally, I know in America we don't, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, suck it up, soldier
Yeah.
on type mentality, but people had no choice but to confront it. And so I think that helped shift the culture a little bit. I know as somebody who's been, sort of rather candid with his mental health prior and after witnessing the way the conversations changed around it. I mean, it's getting to the point where being neurodivergent is like, it seems like it's becoming yet another club, and it's like, mm, you know, I like look at the stereotypes before, and now we have like TikTokers making thousands of dollars making cute lists about ADHD symptoms. And it's like, secure that bag, but interesting choice. So speaking of self-exploitation, welcome to RantCast, everybody. Um, yeah, so resetting the empathy and the wholesome thing, and I don't want to like take too many words out of your mouth or anything like that or speak for you, so I'll let you kind of put your own riff on the wholesome thing, because I think we've got like sort of synonyms going on here with our views. Just with Flanagan, and I'm not certain if you did Doctor Sleep at all in any of your wholesome
I haven't
elements.
done Doctor Sleep. I haven't done Doctor Sleep. I'd
Okay.
like to at some point, but not yet.
Well, I guess no, I finished the thought. I'll double underline the question I had at the beginning. I finished the thought. So there's a scene in it that was too much for Stephen King in the test scene. And
The
it's when
kids in the
yeah, the
van.
kid.
Yeah.
Yep, yep. And part of my understanding of that scene is like Kubrick versus um Flanagan's like directing styles were directly compared over the course of these films. Like Kubrick tortured the shit out of his cast, was kind of famous for
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah.
To
Yeah.
get like the real fear. And this
Although I
kid,
will say,
okay.
just because there's a narrative that kind of goes around The Shining, um, around Shelley Duvall. She has, and this is from her mouth, so I feel like I need to voice specifically because a lot of people are constantly going on about how terrible that time was there and
Mhm.
how she was tortured and like left her from acting. She has since came out and been like, yeah, it was actually a pretty good time. Like I actually value my time with Kubrick on The Shining a lot. She was like, it was hard work, but he didn't single me out entirely. And that's not to say that Kubrick wasn't a torturous director, because
Wait,
by all
well,
accounts he was, but Shelley Duvall has sort of like cleared up the sentiment that she was singled out and picked on specifically.
she added some context, right? Like some,
Yeah.
and I know again, it's the times they are a change in, to quote Bob Dylan, right? Like it's
Hmm.
how we film, how we create art, and it should change, right? Like we should change, like the art. And one of the things I struggle with as a writer is like the stories I'm writing now. I've got long projects, I've got short projects. I look at some of the shorter projects I have and I'm like, wow, this is way better than this thing I've been writing for years, because I'm a
Mm.
different writer now years later. And you know I'm sure you can see that in your film and your YouTube stuff as well.
Oh yeah, I mean, me and my friend revisited a script we wrote 5 years ago because there was some interest in it from Sky. It didn't go anywhere, but there was some interest in it very briefly. So we were like, let's revisit it, and we went through it, and we basically ended up rewriting the whole thing, like changed characters, changed resolutions and stuff, because you grow a lot.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah. So the scene that was too much for for Stephen King says directly to Mike Flanagan. He's like, that scene was a bit much, wasn't it? Uh, my understanding is that Mike Flanagan's like recording it, and the kid wanted to shoot more and more. Like he was having fun,
Yeah.
and without that actual empathy and care between director and the actor, that scene probably doesn't get made. So when I talk about like horror made from empathy, I don't just mean like from the narrative and the storytelling and the sort of philosophical. I mean like in terms of the craft itself, physically making this
Hmm.
movie, getting because the previous thought was that a director must make it real, right? They must make their actors real. So in Kubrick's sense, it was making it a scary on set for people to have them get that authentic fear across the screen. And
Yeah, Hitchcock was pretty relentless with the birds as
oh,
well. And then you
yeah,
had Ridley Scott with the chest burster, not telling the cast that the chest burster was going to pop out.
yeah. You have all the and I always think that's a fun little sort of case in point to Mike Flanagan. And maybe I'm not saying thing good, thing bad. I just do think it kind of
Oh, yeah.
lends itself to that empathy quality just kind of throughout the whole film process.
Yeah, I think there's been like a growth towards like a kind of directing style. I was watching a thing on the behind the scenes of Insidious the other day, and James wanted to make sure the kid wasn't like too traumatized from the demon. I forget what the demon's called. He made a point of like taking the kid, and he's like, "Look, this is just your friend who's an actor. Look, the teeth come out," and he was like showing him getting the makeup on and all that. He's like, "So don't worry, don't worry." And I was like, "That's nice to see. That's very nice to see."
Yeah. No, it's cool. And the final point on Mike Flanagan, I didn't think I was going to hammer this home so much, was the Black Mass. There's a character in that I hate singularly so much, and like me, empathy, hope guy, ha ha ha. I'm like, I hate her. I want to see her die. In that classic like horror movie, you watch the kids go to Camp Crystal Lake, and you're like, I hope they get murdered ingeniously. I'm here for whatever weird inventive weapon is used. I'm just like, destroy this person. They deserve it. And have you seen Black Mass?
It's
Midnight
one of
Mass.
the
Midnight.
ones I haven't. It's one of the
Okay.
ones I haven't.
All right. No spoilers. There's a character he makes me feel bad for hating eventually. And I'm just like, you bastard. Like, how do you do this? But again, it's the Rose with the Hat thing where like he even has an empathy for the monster in that. And he's got empathy for the characters. And, I think the parody sort of drawn between The Shining, I'm talking the films, the books, Stephen King, whatever. They're in their own category, right? But The Shining very much a sort of allegory for alcoholism, right, and the struggle with alcoholism, and the other one being a film of recovery. I don't think you could flip directors, have Kubrick. I mean, they're both skilled; they both would have made a fine film. But I don't think they land the same if you flip directors, having one tell the story of alcoholism.
No, I'd agree. I'd agree with that.
Yeah, right on. So this is the question I wanted to get back to for a while, but I kept looping around it. The show is called RantCast. Why a trilogy, man? Why are you out after 3 for Wholesome Halloween?
I'll tell you why. One sec. I got to get up a number right now. Okay, bear with us. Bear with us. But it is this Wholesome Halloween year. I have written 143,820 words of content. And I start this like maybe 2 months before, and that's me starting early. And I've done that while also working 3 jobs and trying to get a huge documentary project off the ground and sell scripts and write scripts. It's just too much work, man. That's all it boils down to in the end of it. The total word count for Wholesome Halloween across the years is 348,522 words. And I can see on my little chart here, each year, without me even meaning to, it has gotten sizably bigger. So the first year it was only 61,794 words. The second year it doubled nearly to 127,271 words, and then getting a bit bigger again. That's 143,820 words, and that's not counting doing extra things like this year I went overboard with the title sequence. So, I bought a smoke machine and a VCR and had illustrations for all of the VHSs, commissioned new thumbnails that are better than not average thumbnails, and then like getting all of the directors and writers of different films involved for interviews and arranging those interviews and then cutting those interviews. And so, yeah, it's just blowing up and blowing up and blowing up and blowing up. And the more and more I'm doing it, I love it. I really do. But the more I'm doing it, the more it's stopping me from doing other things. This Wholesome Halloween 3 was way bigger than the previous efforts. But it was meant to be twice the size of what it's ended up being. It was meant to be way, way, way bigger. Like, spoilers, I've got a video coming up on Saw. That video was meant to be on the entire franchise of Saw. I was going to have like one of the videos be like, like we're talking like 2 to 3 hours long. And then huge opportunity came up. A couple of them, one of them being Terabytes, which is the horror gaming documentary, which, by the way, people should totally check out. The page we just launched. The trailer's on there now. It's on creatorvc.com/terabytes. Terabytes being a pun, it's spelled TERROR, not terabytes like computer chip.
I relish a good pun, but I love a bad pun even better. Like, if someone groans when they hear the pun, you're in the sweet spot.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, and so
I've been dropping these links in chat too, by the way, everyone. So
awesome. So yeah, like that coming up kind of meant stripping back a lot of the Wholesome Halloween 3, and I'm still very happy and proud of what I've done and what's to come. But the scope of it was way bigger, and it just became very obvious that if I did it at the scope I wanted to, that I couldn't do the other big opportunities that were coming around. And so it's just, as it's become bigger and bigger, I was like, let's go out on trilogy. Because by the end of the trilogy as well, I'll end on my 100th episode, because there's going to be 30 episodes from the first one, because the 31st was the August Club, which is my film. 31 from the second one. 4 Christmas specials. 31 this year, and 4 Patreon exclusives. And that means that I will end the last one on 100 episodes and a trilogy. And for me and my autism brain, that's just all the Tetris blocks lining up into a perfect tetromino piece, into a perfect Tetris, and clearing the screen. And that's just like, I can sort of file that chapter in my life as done and do a bunch of other cool stuff that I want to do.
I mean, you strike me as a rad dude, and I don't want to like infer, somebody through their art or whatever. And I think that,
No,
Paris,
I'm 100% a rad dude.
Perfect. Okay, like scientifically.
I want a little lower thirds that says Dan Drambles, rad dude.
Rad dude. Yeah, I'm gonna when I release the VOD for YouTube, I'm gonna be sure that I really prioritize rad dude in the search engine optimization.
Yeah, if you can filter on like sunglasses onto us, and like sparkles and shit coming behind us, make us like animators doing a kickflip, that'd be sick.
Yeah. Oh yeah. See that I have to do that. I thought you weren't doing Wholesome Halloween anymore because of how much human makeup cost, and it's just more comfortable to stay a skeleton.
It is more comfortable to stay a skeleton. Yeah. Honestly, the makeup's a big issue for me, because you guys obviously, you see the end result, which is just the skeleton. And yeah, I suck at makeup, man. I suck so hard. You can tell if you watch it back, and now that I've pointed out, you can tell which videos I've recorded in batches together, because there'll be like 4 in a row where the makeup is the same, and then the 5th one, the makeup will be completely different. It is the most inconsistent makeup you will ever see in your life. I'm sorry to point this out to you because it'll irritate you, because it irritates me. There are episodes this year where I have no neck, because the white that day I did it too faint, and it just completely, when the camera's on, it just blends in with the black, and so there's just no neck bone. And yeah, and this is the thing, right? It's very, very simple makeup. Like, I literally followed the easiest tutorial in the world. Like, this is deemed the easiest tutorial. Simple skeleton makeup. And it takes me fucking hours to put that shit on. And the first time it took 6, and it just shouldn't.
And
the tutorial video is 10 minutes long. 10 minutes. It takes me hours to put it on. I've finally got it down to 2. But even 2 is too much. Like, that is a 10-minute makeup job at best.
You could be watching and writing notes for a whole other horror movie in that time, right? Like,
oh yeah, 100%. And I mean, like, obviously, I'm not doing this once. This happens a lot. And the other thing as well is a fucking nightmare to take off, because my shitty little apartment rarely has hot water. And I know I made a gag about that at the end of one Wholesome Halloween where I was like, I just look like this now because I've got no hot water. But I've had that again this year. Not all the time, but multiple times on a night. I'm like, it's like 2 a.m. I'm finished recording. I've got work in like, got to get up for work in like 4 hours. And I'm like, okay, I need to shower and get all this crap off us. And it's an ice cold shower and nothing's coming off. And I'm going into work looking like I'm about to join the Black Parade. Like, just fully like
you hear a
emo
single
kitted out.
piano note.
Single piano note as I walk in. It's just eyeliner. Like, I remember the first Wholesome Halloween I did. I was so overworked and so just out of it. And I needed to go into the office. I was freelancing at where I work at the time, so I didn't have set hours. And I needed to go into the office to grab something and jump out. And a new lass had just started at the office, who's now a good friend of mine called Rosie. And it was her first day at the office, and she is sat at a computer, and everybody else is, working at like this preset time. I rock up what seems like 2 hours late, still covered in makeup from the night before, completely forget her name and go, "Oh, hiya, Sarah. You all right? Nice to meet you." Her name's not Sarah. And that was her first impression of me. Her name's Rosie. And that was her first impression of me. I look like
it was a strong impression, no doubt. Like
it left a lasting impression. It gets brought up a couple of times every year.
That's pretty great. Oh man. So I gotta ask in this because I mean you clearly put a ton into the Wholesome Halloween, and it's part of the thing that haunts is how much effort, not in the scope of Wholesome Halloween by any stretch, but I'm cutting this podcast down to once a month. It used to be once a week, several hours a week, tracking down guests. And I did a show with B. Dave Walters. I'm not certain if you're familiar with B. Dave Walters. He's a professional GM, right? Like
Okay.
he did the for the Netflix little like celebration weekend with D&D Beyond. He GM'd the cast from Stranger
Sick.
Things. So I mean,
wow.
this is about as big as it gets in the tabletop RPG community, right? And I had him on. It was kind of like the last episode I did before my hiatus, and I'm sitting there staring at the numbers, the algorithm, right? The fucking robots, and I'm like, I've been putting all this into this, and fucking 200 people watch this show, and I'm just staring at it, and I'm like, during the show I felt great, and then afterwards I look at the numbers and I'm like, I must be insane. I thought I did good. The numbers don't reflect that.
But
What the
here's the thing
Yeah.
you got to rationalize though, right? Like, you look at 200 and you're like, oh, that sucks. That fucking sucks because, look at all these people who get like millions, and they're maybe some people you
And
even
they're just
feel
doing
like are putting in
skeleton
less
makeup
effort.
tutorials, and they just have millions of people.
And you're looking at these people who do millions and all that, but like, have you ever stood in front of a room of 200 people?
Yes.
It's a fucking lot of people, dude. I used to do stand-up comedy. Biggest gig I ever did was, I think, 300 or 400. I remember getting on that stage and thinking, holy fucking shit, this is the most amount of people I have ever seen in my life.
I can see that.
And
yeah.
like, yeah, like that's an insane number of people to be interested in you. It's microscopic in the scale of the global population of the planet, but then so is the hundreds of millions in the global scale of the population of the planet. If you've got 200 people who are genuinely actively engaging and enjoying your stuff, like that's an achievement, man. And that's what, and I get it. I'm the same. Like I've got to get it in my head. Like I am beating myself up this month because I'm looking at the numbers for Wholesome Halloween this year, and I'm like, it's the biggest one I've ever done. It's the most effort I've ever put in. It's the most prepared I've ever been for it. And it's not doing the numbers it did, that last year did, and it's not doing the numbers the year before did. And like that sucks for us. And I've just uploaded the fucking YouTube. Don't help as well. The little snidey bastards sneaking in all this shitty. There's less people tuning in than normal. Have you considered just doing something else? Yeah, the fucking 10 out of 10. I've just made yesterday's video 9 out of 10 on my board, and I'm like, but
yeah, go ahead.
you just gotta ignore it.
Well, and that's the thing is like I try to tell myself that, and so that like effort to pay off, that wasn't weighing into your decision to hang up the hat. It was mostly on the pursuing other stuff. Whatever. Not to be too
yeah.
I mean,
yeah, I don't. if it was like yes and no, because the effort to pay off, like it's not that the effort to pay off is the reason that I'm hanging up the skeleton jacket, because if
When you say it
it
that way, I
was
got like visibly and physically sad. I'm like hanging up the skeleton jacket. No, go on. Sorry.
where if it was, I would have stopped after the first one, because the first episode, sorry, the first series that I did, it did great compared to today to this month's one in terms of just views from me personally, and but yeah, I would have stopped then, because even then, when it was less effort than it is now, it was still the most effort I was putting into content on the channel, and it didn't make like a lick of the numbers that if I just reviewed a Marvel movie did, or if I
Yeah.
just covered like it's like
Why
perfect
the new
example, right?
Marvel movie sucks, right? Like
Yeah.
he had a
Well, even a positive one, like perfect example, right? I reviewed Sonic 2 like 4 weeks after it came out, or something like that. It was like quite late. I was quite after the algorithm. And that I reviewed that because I wanted to review that, because I am I'm autistic, so by default I like Sonic. The it's literally comes with the like certificate.
yeah,
Um,
and it's got like your like the stamp they put on it is actually just Sonic and the little
yeah, it's just a
shark
little
above
Sonic
it.
being like, "Congrats, you got aughts." The Yeah, so I'm very into Sonic. So I was like, I want to cover this, even though I'm late to it. I was late to it because I had a million other things going on, and like that, like because it was Sonic 2, even like 4 weeks later, 15,000 views first week. Not a single one of my Wholesome Halloween videos is going to scratch that. And that one was literally just my voiceover with some trailers cut over it. The Wholesome Halloween stuff, it's makeup, it's lighting, it's fog machines,
Oh,
it's
legit film, legit cinematography, and like actual, yeah, you
yeah,
filmmaking, yeah.
it's so much more editing. It's like I've made like custom adjustment layers that go over all the clips, so give it that like kind of grainy old presentation feeling. Custom titles. There's After Effects work. It's a lot more goes into it, but I'd still rather do that. As much as I love Sonic, I'd rather do the Wholesome Halloween stuff. So it's not that. But having said that, if the Wholesome Halloween episodes were getting like I'm not gonna lie, if the Wholesome Halloween episodes were getting like 100,000 a pop, I would absolutely be doing them till the day I die.
Right,
But
yeah.
that's less because it's good views, but also because like at that point
Well,
it's
no, yeah.
like it's enough to
Sustain, right? Like,
sustain, and that can be my focus. And whereas at the moment, I do Wholesome Halloween 3 alongside, chasing the dream with films and scripts and doing like 3 jobs to supporters, and so yeah, like it's not the fact that it's huge that's stopping us, but it also isn't the fact that it's huge that's stopping us.
right. And I mentioned before that you're a rad dude, TM. Uh,
TM, it is
uh,
copyright.
yeah. It's, and I don't want to go. Rantcast isn't political, folks. It's a lot easier to make
You
content
can get political if you want.
when you're
For
willing
me, you
to.
can anyway.
Well, I know that was a joke. Everyone knows. I'm pretty explicit with what I believe. I
Oh,
don't.
okay, right. See, I wasn't aware of that. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, no, it's some of it's for chat gang, some of it's for the guests, and that was for the chat gang there. No, I'm at the beginning of my content creation, I'm like, I'm a leftist, and I would say it that way because people weren't yet ready to swallow the anarchist pill. Because if you're an anarchist, then like leftists hate you because you ruined leftism, and and people who are right hate you because you're any type of leftist, and it's like
Mm.
got to ease into like I'm an anarchist, but there it's all just verbal utility anyway, right? Uh no, so it's like I've noticed with I think sort of like some of the spheres of content I most like, and the folks that I admire a lot. H bomber guy you're talking about, offline, even how I found your content was, thought slime and stuff like
Slime,
that.
yeah.
um we tend not to exploit the labor of people who help us make our stuff,
Oh
you know
yeah, yeah.
and if you could just have someone edit your videos for you, right, or you could afford to pay someone to, they
Well, I'll be
go ahead.
honest. I do pay some money. to edit the videos.
Right.
I edit huge chunks of them,
Mhm.
but it would literally, especially at the scale I've got now, it would literally be impossible for me to edit all of the videos and write them all, because I
Yeah.
still have to, do all the makeup, still film it, still write it, and still edit a significant chunk of them. But yeah, I pay somebody to edit mine, and I
There's an
can't.
honesty to that. I mean,
Yeah,
there
I've
is an
made
honesty. Yeah.
most of the thumbnails, but when I can afford to, I'll pay somebody to make the thumbnails as well.
Yeah, I've made most of my thumbnails too, and it shows in their quality.
Yeah, well, that's why I pay people. That's why I pay people to make mine. So,
Yeah,
like,
my little
you can
graphics I've
tell
been
it's
sharing this
really
week.
funny. It's really funny, actually. If you look at the videos that have just gone, if you look at like not Haunt, sorry. Yeah, if you look at Host, you can
Okay.
tell that somebody else has made that thumbnail, because you can tell that I made the
Oh.
Haunt thumbnail. Like, the difference in quality between those two thumbnails is astronomical. So I made like the thumbnail for Red Snow, the thumbnail for Haunt. I made the thumbnail for, I don't
You
know
know,
if that's out yet, so I'll not say it. I actually don't think it is. I'm going to rewind that back. But yeah, if you look, there's like, I commissioned like 5 thumbnails this year. And I would have commissioned more if I could afford to, but I just couldn't afford to.
yeah,
And
no,
you
it's
can absolutely tell when
yeah.
somebody else made the
Well,
thumbnail.
like I said, it's not it is. I don't know that it's necessarily in the political sphere or just the rad dude category, but paying people for their time and their labor to do stuff for you, as opposed to like, my kid watches these fucking Minecraft videos on YouTube that drive me insane, and I'm like, this person has like has editors and people making thumbnails for him, and he's not paying them, and that pisses me off more than the like sort of like bad recreate a scene from a popular movie with Minecraft characters. Like,
Mm.
I'm just like, like I'm sitting here like just getting. I don't really get mad at like that, but performatively angry over stuff like that. Unbelievable! Did I just get a new follower? Uh, Oh, thank you for the new follow. Yeah, so yeah, it was yeah, I just sometimes the journey of content creation, effort is a prerequisite. You have to put an effort, right? People just and I don't think anyone who quote unquote makes it is putting in no effort, to well, okay, there's a couple people out there that no, I'm just kidding. No, it takes effort. You gotta you to make something out of nothing. And like you're making something that takes effort, and I just think that's a prerequisite. And then there's luck, and then there's trending, and then there's starting to like lean into the algorithm and do all those things you're supposed to do, and that
Yeah,
shit gets fatiguing.
yeah, and
For me, for me.
I know how much of it's luck, because I've had videos where I've put up and thought nothing of them, and then they've ended up on the front page of Reddit, and I've got 100,000 views overnight.
Mhm.
And then equally, there'll be videos that I put loads more effort into, and they struggle
Yeah,
to break 1,000. And
yeah.
it is complete. It is a complete lottery. I never know what's going to stick. I'm always talking to my friend, who edits some of the Wholesome Halloween ones. I'm always saying to him, like, it's not even like a hopeful thing. It's more of just a like fun guessing game thing. Where I'm always like, I think this one will do well, or I think this one will like bottom out. We're always almost always wrong, almost always completely off the mark. And even when you adjust your expectations to what you've just learned from like the previous 10, the next 10 you'll guess all wrong. So you're
Mhm.
like, because like you might do the first 10 and you're like, oh well, in my head, I'm like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre will do great, because that's like a classic,
It's in the
recognizable horror
DNA
film.
of
It is in
horror,
the
right? Like it.
yeah,
Yeah.
and then like Creep does better than it, and I have no explanation as to why that is. And then you're like, oh, okay, so it's the obscure ones that are doing well.
Let's
So
do
I
some more
says, well,
obscure
going
ones.
off,
Go ahead. Go
yeah,
ahead. Sorry.
I was saying to my friend, I was like, oh, so actually looking at Creep, I think Haunt might do well, and then Haunt's been like one of the worst performing ones. So it's like you can never guess. It's complete luck of the lottery.
Yeah. Well, Haunt's recent, and I'm sorry, I'm personally responsible because I haven't watched Haunt yet. But like I said,
It
I
is
have to get my
entirely your
yeah,
fault.
I have to get my
That is the message I'm getting here.
so
Um,
one of my best friends in the AOS community, which is what the RantCast is actually like a Warhammer show.
oh,
That
sick.
that was always that was always the joke or the gag. It was talk about Warhammer to then go into these adjacencies, and over time, is this 4 years now? Over time, or maybe even 5 years, over time, the mask has come off like a Scooby Doo villain, and it's been like, oh,
Yeah.
psych, the show's been about everything else the whole time. And so the episodes I do
So
where I
is AOS Age of Sigmar?
Age of Sigmar, yeah, Age of Sigmar.
I have no idea how I know that.
I
I
don't
don't play Warhammer.
Yeah, I don't play Warhammer 40K. They're like, their flagship one. I play the fantasy one, and even then, I've taken a break for a little over a year now, since before my mental health breakdown. Um, and one of my best friends in the community, in the AOS community, he has both ASD and ADHD, and uh, he would have been formerly called Asperger's, but that's
Mm.
like not a classification anymore, and he doesn't get my sense of sarcasm. It like just flies over his head. And we have some of the most rewarding conversations in the world, because he's like, that was sarcasm, wasn't it? I'm like, yeah, it was. And I've been able to sort of learn, and I don't know, that thought was going somewhere. It's gone. There's my ADHD again.
That's all good.
No, it's just like, I had a better segue for that, but wow, I'm so sorry.
Oh, don't
Um,
worry about it. It's all
no,
good.
but yeah, so for a while there, I would do reviews. Like, whenever I reviewed the book or the battle tome, 600 to 1,000 views, depending on the popularity. If it's the Stormcast army, which is the flagship army of the Age of Sigmar, or the fantasy stuff, right?
Yeah.
Huge, like, and that was a lot more rhythmically, uh like, like, I could predict that with decent consistency. But I
Mm.
have the problem where if I don't care about something, I really can't throw myself into it. Like, I can't, if I don't have a passion there. And I can, like, well, there's the line in Devil's Advocate where he's like, I'm just warming my hands by your fire, right? When, I didn't do any of the evil. Pacino's got this great line. I can residually get hyped up as somebody else's passion. And so that was kind of always the shtick.
Mhm.
Is if somebody else came on and was passionate about something, I'd be like, oh, I don't know what the hell you're talking about, but like, I see you do. Tell
Yeah.
me more. And that's where it was going. So my buddy Nick, like, he cares about three things, and I think it's more the ASD thing, but the three things he cares about, he is obsessed with, right? One of them's barbecuing, and I'm like, man, I want you on to do a Battletome review show one time, and then we're just going to talk about barbecue the whole time instead. Just like, and that was how I always wanted to do the content here. And
Yeah.
like I said, over time, the edifice just kind of dropped, and I just started doing, what is this subject explicitly, and
Mhm.
but yeah, so we covered that. I went on a weird tangent. I don't think I need to ask you why you did Wholesome Halloween.
I mean, I don't think it's obvious, but I'm more than prepared to answer.
But I guess the real question is, what's next?
Lots and lots of things. So my primary focus after Wholesome Halloween at the minute is going to be horror gaming stuff, in order to help. Like, it is something I'm passionate about. I wouldn't do it if I wasn't passionate about it. But also to help promote the huge Creative EC project that's potentially going to go ahead next year. Um, we're just, at the moment, we're still in very early stages of development, so the trailer's up and we've kind of got the synopsis up for people to see. We're just really looking to kind of validate people's interest in it. So we've got a survey on the website that if people fill in, like, we're going to inform the direction the documentary takes based on their answers. So that's going to be a huge focus. And also, I'll probably do some horror gaming stuff on the channel, which would be next. And
So
then
the
in
Dan
terms,
Drambles channel isn't like getting torpedoed.
oh
It's
no, absolutely not, absolutely not. No, that'll always be around. And I've always had, besides October, since I kind of stopped the modern review stuff. Like, I was very, very consistent, like weekly for a couple of years, and then I kind of petered off a little bit with the modern review stuff. And then, other than that, since October, I've carried a pretty irregular schedule just because I've got a lot going on outside of it. I mean, I made a film, so that kind of torpedoed YouTube
this
for
the
about a
this
year while I did that.
the October Club.
The August Club, yeah.
August Club, yeah.
Though the October Club would have been a cool name because it's Halloween. But yeah, the August Club.
Me
It's
for that.
called.
No, I'm kidding.
I know.
Sorry.
I know.
You
I'll
released it
make
at
a
the
note
end
on
of
that in my next film.
Wholesome Halloween too, didn't you? You didn't you? Or was it just
In Wholesome Halloween 2, I said that. I know I released it at the end of Wholesome Halloween 1. But if you remember back to Wholesome Halloween 2, at the end of Wholesome Halloween 2, I literally say, like, I'm not sure I've got another one in me. Like, this might be the last one. Like, I don't know what the future holds. And then, like, not to get too heavy, but then I did plan on doing the third year in immediate row. But if you remember last year, I actually skipped it and just did the 4 Christmas specials. But that was because, like, there was a tragedy that struck us last year that was very grim and just kind of plateaued a lot of stuff. But yeah, so in terms of what's next for me, like I said, primarily focus is going to be on terabytes, but that will mean that some horror gaming stuff goes up on my YouTube channel. I got a little chat thing. August Club is a good watch. Thank you.
Yeah. I was about to take a screen share of my YouTube here to show that I've watched it.
Nice, nice.
Just to get some OG cred. I'm bad at time though, like timelines and stuff like that. Time is meaningless.
Yeah, no, that was like 3 years ago now, because that would have been the first season. And even then, like, the August Club's been in my life for a long time before that, because obviously it released on YouTube 3 years ago, but it was on Amazon Prime Video before then. And obviously I had the premiere in like a cinema in like January 2020. Like 2019. It might even been like it's been a long time brewing. And yeah, like that did like festival runs and stuff. And I'm still writing scripts and I'm still making movies. And I've got some scripts I'm really, really, really excited about. Like I'm not to toot my own horn, but I'm genuinely, like, I feel like I'm writing the best shit I've ever written at the minute. Like I'm writing something that's like genuinely, and I never say this about my own projects. I always approach my projects with this kind of like asterisk of like, oh, I'm just beginning, or oh, like I'm still kind of getting used to things. But I'm like, nah, this is class. This is some grade A stuff. So yeah, honestly, I know I'm going like in circles and on tangents, but it's literally because I've got so many things in mind that I want to do that it's hard to even start. So, I mean, do you want to pitch for some of the stuff that I plan to?
Just if if you want to shout out, or that concern as a fan, and I'm not really one to blow smoke. You really are one of my favorite YouTubers, like one of the ones I always come back to. And ADHD, we have this out of sight, out of mind problem where we, and that happens with content. It happens with our friends. If I haven't talked to a friend in a while, it's not that I love them less, or it's just, it happens to everything, which is why I said, hey, send me a reminder about the statue thing after this, because I will have forgotten about it. I have a great memory. It's just that operational memory. And your content is like, because I always joke that like Halloween's best holiday, October best month, second best is April, by the way, that's when my birthday is. It's also the halfway point to Halloween, because it's so central to the joke I always make is that like Halloween's my favorite holiday because it's the one time a year where I'm normal, and if you're not on board with it, then you're the weirdo, because the rest of the time of the year I'm the weird one, and it's your content's always kind of like, just it never really goes out of sight for me. And so like my concern as a fan was like, oh no, he says this is the last Wholesome Halloween. No, not my favorite skeleton on the internet. What's going to happen from there?
I appreciate that, but
it's
yeah.
a little self-aggrandizing when I ask what's next. If I want to keep watching my favorite skeleton on the internet, perhaps in his human suit, that was, like I said, it was a little, yeah. So,
well, yeah, I want to do so I want to do like horror game and stuff. I'll always like do like sort of semi-regular uploads to the channel and talk about things. I want to do more scripts and stuff. In terms of like stuff that's kind of in the filmmaking realm, but not necessarily something I'm going to go to like festivals with. I have like a couple of ideas for like, a couple of shorts and some like like kind of lower key fiction stuff that'll go onto the channel. So one of those things is I've wrote 3 scripts for a thing I call Tales from the Sleepy Duck Inn, and that's just so that I can play with animation a bit. So the idea is it's really low key sort of slice of life stories in a Dungeons and Dragons style reality, but instead of having to animate the absolute grand adventures that these characters go on, it's 2 people in a tavern talking over the adventures after they've happened. And yeah, I'm really excited about that. Like, I think especially the first and the third episode, the second one needs a little bit of work, but the first and the third episode I've written, I think they're great. I think like I'm really really excited about it, and yeah, and then I've got I want to play around with I don't know if you've come across Joel Haver before. He's got like he created this style of animation that uses this software, so it's like rotoscope, but it like auto rotoscopes, but it kind of looks all glitchy and broken. I want to play around with a
Okay.
video
with the animation style.
Yeah, I want to play around with a video in that style called Static. So it's going to be a like fake trailer, and it's going to start off with 2 yellow kids sat at the edge of a gorge, literally like yellow. And then one's got blue hair and one's got spiky hair, and it's obviously a very clear homage to The Simpsons. But it's like copyright
legally distinct from
legally distinct Simpsons.
Yeah.
And the Bart character is sitting with the
legally
Milhouse
distinct
character.
from Bart character.
The Bart character, and
we'll call him Art and Illhouse, right?
Bert and Blue. We'll call him Blue because he's got blue hair. But so the Bart character is sat, and they're just kind of like looking out over this like massive gorge, and then the Bart character says, "You know, does it ever bother you that we've been like 12 years old now for 40 years?" And then out of nowhere, the Millhouse character pulls out like a cigarette, takes a big long drag, sits back and goes, "Every fucking day." And it's like a fake trailer about a show where a sitcom character is becoming aware that they are a sitcom character and having an existential crisis that, because they are in the format of a sitcom, nothing they do has meaning because everything in their life will always reset to the status quo. And so he's like trying, like, you know, like one week he's like trying fucking heroin and he's going to space on adventures, but at the end of the day, no matter what he does, he still ends up on that couch at the end of the day with his family, tuning into the thing. And he sort of becomes aware that like the Springfield stand-in is this purgatory, and it's just keeping him trapped in there. And
so it's like my life.
Well, funny enough you say that. So I wrote this because it came from being very, very, very overworked. I was working like multiple jobs, and one of them was like full-time. So I was going from a full-time job into a part-time job, and I was working my weekends and that, and I just had like no time. And it kind of like had that realization that I think a lot of people have these days of like, is this just the rest of my life? Like, I'm working all of this stuff and I'm still got no money. Like what I'm doing everything I can to kind of get to the next month. What is this? And then the occurred to is like that the 9 to 5 for Bart Simpson is, you know, all these crazy adventures and wild hijinks and stuff that go from everything to, you know, getting bullied by the neighborhood bully to literally flying to the sun. Because, you know, that's what The Simpsons is kind
Sometimes,
of.
it
Jumps the shark all over the place. It goes into space. They've met aliens. They've fought monsters. There's Treehouse Horror thing. But no matter what happens, at the end of the day, they're still 12 and they're still on that couch. Gonna watch the thing.
I mean, there's like such a meta. You know, this has like brings to mind several thoughts for me actually. So like, shout outs to the premise, fantastic idea. But like, the characters in The Simpsons also have like an aggregate awareness of characters that have been in their lives and aren't. For instance, like dogs that have died and like Bleeding Gums Murphy and stuff like that. They have an awareness of other characters that like have exited their purgatory essentially, which is has to, when you think about it as like a character who's maybe not necessarily aware that you're trapped as 12 for 40 years, but you have an awareness that like, oh yeah, this one friend died and now they're not here anymore.
So funny you mentioned that. That's the catalyst. So it starts off, because again, it's a like I've got an episode planned, but I know that I'm not going to be able to do the episode realistically anytime soon. So I'm just kind of like mocking up the trailer. So the trailer starts with Bart being like, in a therapist office, and his voiceover is playing over like what he's talking to the therapist is playing over like a montage of him just kind of looking in existential dread at all of these things and feeling nothing. And he's like, I just feel like when you've done everything becomes nothing. And you see like a montage of him like literally in space, and he's looking at the globe from and there's just like expressionless, and then like doing drugs, expressionless, like just all these crazy like over the top things that the Simpsons have done and like engaged in, and he just feels nothing. And then you see like his dad doing the "why you little" and chokes him, and as he's being choked, he's just like, because it's just this endless cycle for him. And then in the middle of the trailer, Marge comes in, and she's like, again, Marge, legally distinct Marge, comes in, and she's like, Bart, Milhouse has died. And Bart's like, no, he hasn't. And she's like, what? And like Homer comes in, and then they're like, no, Milhouse has died. There's been an accident. Like Milhouse has died. Your best friend's died. And Bart's just like, no, he hasn't. And they're like worried about him because they don't see the purgatory of the place. They're like, what's this kid talking about? Like, is this like denial? And they're sort of sitting him down. And they're like, oh, you can't like deny. Like you need to like accept. Like, I know it's a shocking thing. And Bart's like, no, you don't understand, right? He's died. Okay, he's died. Like, yeah, he's totally died. But there's going to be some circumstance. It's going to turn out he's faked his death, or there's going to be an angel come down and resurrect him, or there's going to be, and he's coming out with all these things. He's like, at the end of the day, when I wake up tomorrow morning, we'll all get on that couch, we'll watch TV, and then I'll go out and I'll hang with Milhouse. And he'll still be there, because he always is, because he is every day, no matter what we do. And he wakes up the next day, and he goes downstairs, and he's in his like pajamas, and everybody's like getting dressed up in suits. And he's like, what's going on? And they're like, well, it's the funeral. The family wanted to have the funeral pretty quickly and stuff. And he's like, what? And then you just see like a cut to like Milhouse's funeral, and Bart just kind of staring and being like, something's changed. Like, what the hell? Like, nothing ever changes. How has this happened? And he's just kind of in this like weird dread. And like the Lisa character confronts him and is like, are you okay? And he's like, no, something's different. And she's like, what do you mean? He's like, you know that feeling how like nothing ever changes. And she's like, I don't get what you mean. She's like, Lisa, like, we went to space last year. Do you not think that's weird that me and you are just sat in, this little estate house now having this conversation when we literally met aliens last year? He's like, do you even remember that we met aliens? And she's like, thinks about it, and she's like, I sort of do, but it feels like a dream almost. And he's like, exactly, like it's this place.
Oh no.
And he's like, but Milhouse has gone. Like, I don't understand what's happened. And then yeah, the end of so if it was an episode, the end of the first episode is he comes back home, like totally unsure what's going on, and there's a note on his bed, and the note just says, Bart, I got out, Milhouse. And he signed it. And he's like, and that's like the cliffhanger of like, there's a way out of this purgatory. And what's going to happen in the trailer, what you'll see, is Bart sort of slowly realizes that he has he becomes aware of it, of the semantics of the TV show. So there's a bit where he looks at his reflection in the so it's kind of a horror thing as well, because obviously it's me.
Yeah.
There's a bit where he looks at his reflection in the mirror and he just thinks he sees something, and he leans in and he thinks he sees something in his eye, and he pulls his eye down and he sees like the RGB strips of the CRT TV, like when you look really close at
Uh-huh.
something, and then his eyes flick static and he's like, whoa. And then there's like a bit where he's like lying in a field and nobody else seems to notice, but there's this giant shadow looming over him. And as he looks, you can just see through the sun and the clouds, through the glare, the titles of The Simpsons casting the shadow onto him. And then there's a bit where he like walks into frame and he like looks directly at the audience and he's looking out at them, and as if like, you know, he's like, something's weird, and he's kind of like examining, like almost like you can see the barrier.
Uh-huh.
And he moves forward and he like looks left and right and he grabs the sides of the 4x3 bars and he pushes them and he turns the show into 16:9. And that's like how that, and in that universe, in that reality, that's how The Simpsons became HD,
HD.
because Bart realized the aspect ratio was all weird. And yeah, and it's just him kind of like coming to this realization. But then there's because it's all, you know, metaphorically. I'm going on a massive ramble here. I told you, Dan Drambles.
Keep going. No, the show's called RantCast. Keep.
So yeah, it's because metaphorically it's about these like systems that just keep winning these perpetual cycles all our life, because really it's kind of just about me being sick of the 9 to 5.
Late stage capitalism. It's like
Yeah,
sort of... Oh, go ahead.
the obstacles in his life, primarily the antagonistic force becomes Homer, because Homer is an older person who just never questions it. He just never
Oh,
questions the
he's
system.
totally comfortable
Yeah.
in this
And
world.
so he becomes the kind of like boomer voice who's like, what do you mean? Everything's fine. And just keep chugging, just keep on going. And Bart's like, but we don't need to. There's a way out. There's a way out of this. There's a better system somewhere, maybe. And like, isn't it worth like looking into that? Isn't it worth trying? And Homer's just like, no, you will do the week to week sitcom for the rest of your life, and you will stay 12 forever, and you will like it. And yeah, and then like, and there's a redemption arc for Homer and all that, because ultimately he's a victim of the same system as Bart is. But it's just it's about trying to sort of like, it's Bart essentially becomes like, he kind of the facade of the system like becomes unraveled to him, and the blindfold kind of gets taken off, and his struggle is kind of getting other people to remove that blindfold. And that's why Homer becomes the antagonistic force, because he is the one that's most reluctant to take that blindfold off.
You have a very good like eye for the for narrative, quite frankly. So you one, the visuals are already ingrained in your storytelling to begin with. Like you didn't have like it was so natural, like, you know, how this visual moment reflected this sort of narrative or metaphoric issue, right? Which was really cool. But it's also like in the sort of construction of a good story, you have you have your like, well, what's different? Why are we telling the story right now? Right? That's something you always have to be conscious of when you write a story. Why now? And I mean, you answered that like immediately. Like it wasn't just a like, oh well, I need a catalyst. It was like, no, this is like the catalyst is almost the part of why the story even exists to begin with, right? Like it's very natural, very seriously, kudos. I sincerely hope to see this project.
I appreciate that. I've
And
got like, one thing I really, really enjoy, and it's so fucking self indulgent. I fucking love pitching, because it's getting all of the excitement and getting everybody sort of like, yeah, for the idea, without having to do any of the actual work of making it. It's great.
having it, oh man, you've been around films, I think, so you understand that having an idea is a skill. Uh
Mm.
my buddy, he finished his film uh finished his film degree. He, you know, kind of dabbled in a lot of the stuff, you know, script writing, trying to get a spec script sold, you know, doing all that stuff. And he was taught by a pretty decently famous experimental films guy who just like sell a script and teaches kids for kicks, right? Like he was pretty well established. He was a professor for kicks, for piss away money, you know, just
Yeah.
And he told a story about how, the next insert whoever the director who has the most hype in the time, M. Night Shyamalan,
Mm.
Tarantino, insert that guy. He was talking about this kid at this sort of networking party, who's like, this guy's got this film, it's hitting all the scenes. He's going to be the next M. Night Shyamalan. He's going to be the next whoever, right?
Yeah.
And they got him to go and talk to some of the producers, and they're like, okay, what's next? And he's like, what do you mean what's next? Like, this is the movie I want to and right there, the fact that he didn't have the next idea immediately on fire in that
Mm.
moment, it was the difference between having a career or not. Now, I don't
Wow.
know if that story is like allegorical. I kind of got it secondhand, but I still think about it when I'm trying to like fight I call it the tar in my marrow. Like, my depression is a very physical thing. It
Mm.
it's like fucking Hexes from Fern Gully, except not cool and sexy. It just like seeps out and it just kind of wraps around my heart and my head, and I can't get out of this dark echo chamber. And that's the aggressive punk stuff. And one of those things I have to tell myself is that I always have the next idea. That is a talent. And like, I start to talk to other writers and other folks, and then when they have just this one idea they dedicate their whole life to, I'm like, cool. But don't you ever think of like, I have so many ideas at all times. I feel like I'm always pulled in a different direction. And like, I want to do them all, and prioritizing them becomes like my own type of paralysis. But also, I wouldn't have it any other way. The reason I'm such a good GM, the reason I love RPGs as like a narrative format, is because it's a living story in the
Yeah.
way that, like, I know pretty much all stories have life. I mean, that's what Death of the Author is all about. It's not about, disconnecting the author from their art. It's about the transactional
Yeah. It's a
nature.
very misunderstood essay, Death
Right.
of the
Yeah,
Author.
it's people.
Very misunderstood.
Right. It's really just
Yeah.
about the transactional nature of art, right? Like,
Yeah.
that art, it's the meaning forms in that sort of dialogue between artist
Yeah.
and that's why,
People.
like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say people totally misunderstand the concept of like separating art from an artist as well. Like that, it's not just about like, oh, like let me enjoy this
I
person who
can
is
buy Harry
shitty.
Potter because
Yeah,
Death
it's
of the
got nothing to
Author.
do with
No,
that. It's
no,
got nothing to
sorry.
do with that.
No.
Like if you want to buy something from somebody who's problematic, that is entirely your prerogative, and it's like
Yep.
up to you what you want to do. Like that's totally fine. Like
Life is hard.
yeah,
Do what you
like
gotta,
it's that's your prerogative, and like yeah, you might get some pushback for it. You might upset some people if you're supporting some very nasty people, but like that's a consequence of supporting nasty people. But like like I enjoy a lot of I enjoy horror. Do you know how much of horror is
Yeah.
problematic?
Right, right.
Like it's like you pick and choose your battles, but the one that always irks me is when people use separate art from the artist as this kind of like catch-all thing of like, oh yeah, I can totally enjoy this dude's music, even though he's a Nazi, because like he's good at guitar. Like who
Same.
cares? That's
I
not what it's about. Because people never do it the other way.
Right.
People never do it the other way. I
Oh,
wanted
they're
to do
great.
a video about this actually.
Oh, brilliant.
Nobody ever does, right? So like, perfect example, right? There's a film called Final Girls. I've covered it on the channel. There's a film called
One of
Final
my
Girls.
absolute favorite films, by the way. I know
Fucking
that it
great.
shouldn't have a sequel, but I want it to. I
Yeah.
really want to see that movie
The
that
little
takes place
post
when
credits
they're
of it, yeah.
when they're in the hospital. I
So
really,
good.
it's
So
so
good.
good. Yeah, yeah, and
To
good use of
me,
the OST, by the way. Go
yeah.
ahead. Sorry.
So to me, the film. So for those who haven't seen it, the film at its very basic setup is a girl whose mother was a horror icon in a cult classic horror film that's very much a riff on Friday the 13th, dies in a car crash. And she is struggling with the grief of the loss of her mother. And one night they're playing that film. She goes to the cinema and they end up sucked into the film. So she essentially meets her mother, but it's not her mother, it's the character her mother played. But it's that kind of weird dissociation of like, you were my mother in real life and you died and I'm grieving you and now I'm seeing you, but it's not you and it's this character. It's incredible and it navigates all the emotions of grief really like
Oh, so good.
beautifully. It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Oh,
I think,
I legit tear up watching it every fucking time,
yeah.
especially in that third act where she.
Incredible third act.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I think that becomes a more interesting movie. And everybody I mentioned this to agrees with me. When you realize it was written by a guy whose dad has died, but his dad was a major role in The Exorcist 3. And one of the ways he still gets to see his father and have his father in his life is by watching The Exorcist 3. But he says it's really weird watching The Exorcist 3 because I get to see my dad again, but he also dies in it. So I have to relive his death. But it's not the death that I know him to have. And Final Girls, as an articulation of those feelings, is just that is poetic. It's beautiful. And the fact that the guy was able to kind of
On every level.
navigate that grief and tunnel it into this and kind of communicate that emotion is phenomenal. It's the foundational thing that great art is made on. Nobody I ever tell that story to goes like, oh, well, that doesn't matter because you got to separate the art from the artist. That's irrelevant. Nobody does that because why would you?
Right. No,
It's like
go ahead.
you go to a Van Gogh museum and they always talk in all of these like biography and all of these history. They always
The
talk
ear,
about
right?
like the ear and like his mental illness and all that because that is important to the art.
Yeah.
Nobody ever says like, oh well, Vincent Van Gogh's that's irrelevant. Who cares? Like, shouldn't his art stand alone?
Is
It's
it
like it does stand alone, but it's also a product of him. It's and yeah, but suddenly when you need to excuse somebody from shitty behavior, it's separate art from the
well,
artist.
and that's that why death of the author. It's like this is an explicit essay. Like this is a
Mm.
and the other's like a colloquialism, and they've mashed up in the zeitgeist, and like they've become
Yeah.
an excuse to not to not have consequences for the art we consume. Now, I, as a writer, have staked my life on the premise that art matters, that
Mhm.
art impacts life. Now, it doesn't mean like all the moral panics over various art are how it impacts life. I would, like video games in particular. I was in the seventh grade when the Columbine shooting happened in America. This is one the big, huge. I happened to be wearing me as my pseudo goth phase. Happened to be wearing my trench coat. Went into. I never watched the fucking news. I went into
Yeah.
school in that, and everyone pointing and shouting, trench coat mafia at me, and like having no frame of reference. And then the watching the news kind of retroactively to try to figure out what the fuck was going on, and they blamed Doom and
Doom.
Final Fantasy VII
Do you
for it.
know it's interesting actually because that is a topic we're going to cover in Terabytes. So John Romero, the creator of Doom, has worked with Creator VC before. Same with John Carmack.
It was like, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
They're both in the previous film that we've done, FPS Doc. So one of the episodes of Terabytes is going to be, because especially with the horror genre, it's going to be called Cursed and Controversial. And it's all about the kind of scapegoating that video games, especially horror video games, have gotten over the years. And one of the things we're going to approach John Carmack and John Romero. I think I've said John Carpenter a couple of times. John Carpenter is a very different person, but he has also been in creative VC films. So it's an easy. So many Johns, so many successful Johns.
See, I wanted to move my camera slightly so my Revenant Special Collector's Edition Doom figure was in the frame.
Yeah.
But he's hiding behind Cloud's motorcycle right now.
Nice. But yeah, we're going to approach them and sort of talk to them about like how that controversy was for them, because it's one thing when we see people scapegoating Doom and we can kind of roll our eyes and be like, well, that's ridiculous, but people believe it. But imagine being the person who made the art as something fun and enjoyable with your friends, and it was something you were excited to do,
They
and
made
now
it in
suddenly everybody's
college, as I recall, right? Like it was, yeah.
and now suddenly everybody's blaming you for a school shooting, and you're like, geez, I can't imagine. I'd be, I don't, I was going to say I'd be devastated if, something I made was suddenly held as a responsible party in some horrible tragedy. But like, having said that, I don't know that I would, because it's so transparently see through that that's not the case most of these things.
Yeah, the
But
moral
still,
panic
it's got to be a shitty feeling to be the subject of a moral panic.
even a little bit, even a little
Yeah.
bit. I mean, it's interesting because I'm just reminded of like this conversation happens. There's like a hazing period every time a new art form comes out. like the new art form hazes. Like even what Socrates criticized written stories. He said they're destroying the oral tradition of narrative.
Yeah.
Like, and horror comics, which is really, I think, in America in particular, that's actually like the origin of comics, more so than the superheroes we know now. It was a lot more of the horror comics. They were more taboo, which is interesting because the modern like American superhero is essentially like a horror monster inverted story. Like it's really fascinating shit, which is why everyone should read Immortal Hulk. It's anarchist as fuck. There
And
was
very
one
horror.
and gory as fuck. It's
Very
going all the way
horror.
back to the horror
Cronenbergian.
roots. Sorry, body horror warning. And also anti-Semitism on accident, I guess, but whatever. They removed that out. So I'll, fool me once, shame on you. I'll take them at their word. It was an accident and uncritically reproducing images from like whatever, but whatever. Caveat, fuck Nazis. Check out the book.
Absolutely.
So it was there's a conversation Orson Welles had on the BBC, like when he was a little bit younger, about horror comics, and one of the interviewers is like, do you think horror comics are leading to the delinquency of minors here in England? And he's like, if art led children to do anything, I think that there would have been some children who came out of the Globe Theater who did some pretty profound acts for the world. and that's that goes both ways sort of thing, where it's like we want art to be demonized and to be a convenient excuse for why people do the bad thing, but then we're like quick to not really like measure the other side of the scale, like art making people and
it does the latter a lot more than the former.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think about what art means to me is it's quite frankly it's a way to exercise my demons. I can't parse all of this active trauma. And for truth, when you were talking about your Simpsons story, I was already kind of like reading, like I'm like, well, I wonder where that comes from in his life. I wonder where the inspiration for that is. And I was thinking about like you took the parental relationship, and I'm like, well, I wonder what his parents' relationship. And I already started thinking about the art and the artist and how it relates, because my brain just thinks about that. And in the same way, when somebody reads some of my stories, I'd imagine they can infer some things about me and where I come from. They're inextricably linked. The art we create,
I
whether we're
mean,
inverting
like,
ourselves, whether we're taking the worst qualities of ourselves, whether we're exaggerating one thing and focusing in on it, right? We're always going to be this fulcrum for the art we create. We go ahead. Sorry, you sound like you had a thought.
All I was going to say is like they're inextricably linked, even if you don't know it. Like, I mean,
Which is why intentionalism is
like,
bullshit, because you don't know what you write into your stuff. Going
well, like, not to get too heavy, but like, I'm not gonna like trauma dump the specifics or anything. But like, my dad died last year in a pretty horrible and unexpected way, and like a year on, I've looked at like the
I didn't mean
past.
to touch a sensitive topic.
Oh no, that's all good. It's all good. We're good. We're good. But a year on, I have written like 5 major things, and lots of little bits here and there. And it's only like since then I've looked back and I was like, oh, every single one of these stories is about grief. Every one of them. Every single one without failing. And a lot of them have dads who die. And I was like, wonder where that's come from. And I didn't
do that?
notice I was doing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't notice I was doing it at the time. And then I remember like one time I was pitching my girlfriend like the most recent one I wrote, and I was like, so then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. And like this is a bit of an overshare, but I genuinely find it funny. I started crying, and then I went, I don't think this is about orcs and elves, you know. And she was like, no, sweetie, it's not, is it? I'm surprised you didn't know that. And I was like, yeah, I'm just realizing it now.
Just addressing Fabulin here in chat, whose horror comics and obscenity are their PhD thesis, so based and approved. And I guess rather than type it out, I'll say it. My undergrad work was all about how genre fiction was as worthy as literature, in particularly horror. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, my friend who literally sits 3 seats down from me, she's been one of my best friends for years, literally over a decade now, and she works with us just in that corner over there.
Never got my PhD. So,
I was just going to say that was her PhD. Her PhD was on Victorian literature and the Penny Dreadfuls,
metal.
and specifically talking about the repurposing of art and how like Penny Dreadfuls and or which were deemed as like lowbrow, shitty entertainment are
Well,
just as valuable
it's
in the cultural canon
it's
as the celebrated works.
it's fascinating to me how art often more accessible to the underclass or the socially marginalized usually gets a reputation as being bad or obscene. It's so weird. Like it's almost as
Shakespeare
if
was considered lowbrow.
well,
Shakespeare was considered lowbrow at the time. It was considered entertainment for the masses because it was cheap, and the crowds were rowdy. And it's only
very
as it became
provocative on purpose,
yeah,
right? Like it was
provocative. It was like, like there's lots and lots of Shakespeare. We're thinking of it now as like this high culture art thing, but there's lots of Shakespeare as just sex and death. And it was kind of in a lot of ways, the Friday the 13th of its day. It was like schlock
Dickens.
entertainment. Yeah.
Dickens too.
And
He was go
it's
ahead.
only as it became inaccessible, as language changed. And it suddenly became impenetrable because of the barriers of like Old English, that suddenly scholars were like, actually, this is quite fucking fantastic.
Yeah, the elitism around art is always fascinating to me. It's weird because like I somehow balance I do think that art has a objective quality to it. Now I'm not saying like good art or bad art. I mean that like usually there is an intent to create art, right? Like there is good and bad don't factor into it. Like I want to tell a story, boom, you're making art.
Mm,
Um, very famous painting, and I can't remember during apartheid South Africa, and I need to remember the name of this artist so I can do this story justice. Grade schooler creates this just essentially finger paint of the horrors they're witnessing, and it's considered one of the most highfalutin pieces of art to come out of that period. And it's a child making a finger painting. Because I almost said finger, finger painting because of the context that was afforded it and surrounded it. And
mhm.
if somebody were to, everyone's like, oh, I can do a finger painting, and I'm like, well, why is your finger painting not lauded and this one is? And it's like, one, if you were to make a finger painting just to be like, I can finger paint, where's your intent now? Is your intent to create art, or is it to make a finger painting? And then what's the context around it? Context is mostly where art comes from. Like it's uh you know that again, that dialogue between artist and audience. Like, what's the dialogue between this second grader making a finger paint at war atrocities they're seeing and the adults
Well,
seeing it, right? Like,
not to get too topical, but this is why I hate AI. Like I hate AI generative stuff. I mean, there's lots of reasons to dislike it. One, just because AI has become a terrible buzzword that just means anything now.
no
So there's
people don't
there's like actual useful tools
I
being added to
hate
like
how it's
Premiere,
framed.
and it's being called AI, and it's like, no, it's actually just a,
Just an
a
algorithm.
automatic cutter of like it matches things to audio.
The thing
It
I
wouldn't have
used
been
to
called AI before. Like content aware fill in Photoshop, if that came out now, would be called AI.
Yeah, the way I cleaned up my images for the like really silly pictures I've been using, like I have one of you today. I took one of your pictures from your feed, and I cleaned the background with a background removing tool in my paint.net. Uh,
Yeah.
it's open source. Photoshop costs too much money. It's just clip tool, and it cleans the background, which by the way was a pain in the ass because you're in that like sexy bisexual lighting the whole time.
You
Like
should have just said. I would have thrown you. Like I've got plenty like pictures of us in
I
the
know,
skeleton
but
get up.
it was more honest this with dishonest this. I don't know. It's just I didn't want to bug you. Yeah, no, but the AI art, I have my problems are twofold with it. One, kind of your main gripes where uh the heart is being removed from the art, the soul, But
Hmm.
the other part is like we're not contextualizing the conversation correctly at all. Like the lack of ethics for like what we understand as AI art comes a little bit more on the front end. The art that it generates has to be programmed into it. It
Yeah.
doesn't
Yeah.
And so the lack of ethics is a lot of
Yeah,
that.
I mean,
Sorry.
there's so many problems, like the morality of it and the stolen artwork being its foundation. But like even just stripped of morality,
Okay.
just like
Yeah.
the thought that I have is like, have you seen Spielberg's film The Fablemans?
I don't think I have. Let me.
Okay, so it's one of his more recent entries, and it's actually, I would argue, it's kind of Spielberg's at that stage in his career where he can
I've not
release
seen it.
things that are like absolute genuine classics, but everybody's kind of like, he's past it, and they kind of go to the thing. But anybody who's seen the Fablemans like knows it's astounding. But the thing is, right, the Fablemans is about a young boy going through the difficult navigation of his parents' relationship falling apart and escaping into the craft of making films. And it's a love letter to the craft of filmmaking, and it's about the difficulty of navigating that situation, the escapism of art. It's this really beautiful movie, and it's also, even though it's not biographical, it's heavily biographical. Like there is a lot of Spielberg in that movie. Spielberg's parents fell apart, and he was pursuing filmmaking. I mean, it's like it. There's so much of
Whether
the
intentional
scenes
or
in it.
not, right? Like
Yeah,
it's
there's so much of the scenes in it are literally ripped straight from stories of his life that he's told. Now, what interests me is the question of, hypothetically, if AI could put out the Fablemans. And I don't mean like an approximation where everybody's got six fingers. I mean like the actual exact same
yep.
film that Spielberg put out with the exact same actors delivering the exact same performances with the exact same voice, exact same script, exact same frame in every single frame in the exact same runtime. I don't think that has value for me. I don't think I think even though the film is identical, like for me, The Fablemans is a conversation where Spielberg, as a person, is having a conversation with us about his life, about himself, about the things he feels and the things he loves and the things that scare him. If you remove him from that, I don't think it has value. I just don't. Like it might still hit the exact same emotional beats. All the actors might look the same, but like for me, it's like, well, who am I talking to?
My brain went to a strange and wondrous place, and it made me think of Near Automata. I
Yeah,
haven't
Neil
drawn
Automa's incredible.
the association between like the conflict of AI art and like this is a conversation that is worth being had, and I don't think it's being had the right way, which is like a weird gripe to have with it. I feel like a curmudgeon. And I think you framed it really well there, where it's like if we did perfectly replicate it, it's the a million monkeys with a million typewriters over a
Yeah, like
million.
if the
They
Million
and
Monkeys
they
wrote Shakespeare, it's like by accident.
yeah
So it's like, does it mean anything then?
right yeah it's the million monkeys write Shakespeare thing, right? Like um and in Near Automata, you essentially have AI trying to recreate human society, and then like each character is like a nice little inversion of like these brilliant philosophers. And it's when I finished playing that game the first time, I just sat there like on my couch for an alarming amount of time, just like thinking about like what I often joke that like if I could be a robot, I would tomorrow. It'd be like I'd download my consciousness into a robot, and sweet. And then it's like, well, am I me anymore? The something called the consciousness of continuity, or the continuity of consciousness. Soma,
Mhm.
by the way, great horror game, deals with this too.
Yeah, yeah.
Have you played
It's
Soma?
yeah, it's I can't remember if it's in the trailer that we've just put up, but it's definitely in my list of games to
It's
kind
so
of investigate and cover.
so good. So the premise for anyone in chat gang who hasn't yet played this, and I'll try to give it in the broad strokes, is you go in to get your brain scanned for science, just to have it like because the main character, I think they're like they can help with seizures or something, right? That like if they scan his brain, they can get a copy of his brain, and and then you sit down in the chair to have your brain scanned. When the thing gets moved up, you're in a some sort of post-apocalyptic like abyss style Jim Cameron Abyss style post-apocalypse underwater facility. Like, for the perspective of the person playing the game, it's like that. And essentially, you are the brain scan of the guy who went in there. And throughout the game, you're playing this brain scan and you're trying to launch this thing called the Ark, which has all of the brain scans on it, uh, into space, because humanity is just gone, basically. It's just brain scans. Um, and the game never really explicitly asks you the question. Um, but at some point, you download your consciousness into like different bodies, and I know there's a bit at the end that touches on it, but it's like, wait, those bodies I've left behind, are those me? And you just, if you start to think about it, it can become a little maddening. Um, it's this went real deep, by the way. We're now doing a proper rantcast, everyone. We've gone to the philosophy and existential dread. Um, there's a study they've done where they essentially like injected this fluid over the brain, and they asked 1,000 questions 1,000 times to 1,000 people, right? Like they did science rigorously. And essentially, we've just they what's your name, where were you born, and then they started asking questions, favorite color, and then they asked questions like, you know tell me about the first time you rode a bike, and then, and more narrative stuff. And so essentially I get the name wrong, I can't remember it, but essentially there's like sort of like surface memories, like your name, like stuff that we just like we always have in like sort of permanent recall, and then we have like our deeper memories. Um, and they found that when people would answer questions on those deeper memories, the sort of first and second time, so the first time upon being asked, and the second time after the solution was injected, that they would recall the memories. But upon asking them after the solution was on, the memory was gone. And essentially what they discovered is that whenever we recall something, we rewrite our memory just a little bit. Um, and so they couldn't absorb new memories. And so like the way this
Wow.
interplay between like sense memories were, or not sense, surface memories were pretty well named, those things that you just, they're just stored in a different part of your brain. And so these other memories, when you would go to recall them, you would pull them up, and then you would go to store them back, and that solution stopped you from restoring the memory. And first off, I think of those poor, like, whatever the group is that didn't get the control, whoever didn't get the like placebo.
Yeah.
I think about the group that actually they discovered this on. I'm like, oh shit, they just like lost, those memories are gone. Um, but it all speaks to the sort of like wobbliness of reality, and how we're always kind of we're always kind of like live updating it. We're always sort of uh and it makes me think about fucking stupid ADH brain. It makes me think about like how the human element matters. Basically, it's really the
Yeah.
long way of saying the human element matters. It matters in art. It matters in reality. It's why am I obsessed with skeletons, and why am I an alleged lich IRL? Uh, it's because a obsession with death and immortal evil creatures is an inversion of what I value the most in life. It is the impermanence of this stuff that makes it important to me. And with in regards to art, it is the human part of that all, that we do have these snapshots in time. Um, when I was interviewing B. Dave Walters for the Rantcast before hiatus, self plug, go back and watch the episode. We we stumbled upon this thing where like I was kind of researching stuff and watching his videos, and this is true of you as well as a YouTuber. He recorded one of the things he's the most famous for, which is being Victor, this Ventru, highfalutin vampire from the valley, from Hollywood, right? Years ago. The projects he is doing now are like being on Tech TV, and being a live GM on that, and so on and so forth. People can watch me, uh, B. Dave Walters, and it hadn't occurred to me that they watched that episode of LA by Night as if it is today, even though it existed
Mm.
years and years and years ago. And this touches a little bit on the Final Girls as well. Um, and at any given time, somebody is discovering you, sort of in as a snapshot in different periods of time, and
Hmm.
they can just get this whole lexicon of you today, and so there's essentially this different version of you, this soma copy of you that exists in everybody's mind
Yeah.
as they and I was going to wrap that up nicely. I am concerned with AI, the digital ghosts we leave behind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like not
Totally.
concerned. I think about them. Like I think about what digital ghosts. I think about in 100 years when somebody stumbles upon a random rant cast. In a sense, I've achieved immortality because I will live forever through my art. But also, like, is it me? And is AI art? Art? Is it? You know,
Yeah, it's a weird one because it's like you can apply it to so many things. Like if you engage in it's when you engage in the hypotheticals that you really start to like understand, at least for me, why like I don't like AI art, but why there is reason to like dislike it, even though the end result and surface might look the same. Because the art generators like I'm not going to pretend that they're not impressive. Like they can put out something that looks human made, but that's the key word, looks human made. And some people are of the opinion of like, well, it's the same end result, so what's the difference? And it's like to those people, like I would like them to engage with like a hypothetical. And it's like if the human part doesn't matter, would you be okay with, and this is an extreme hypothetical, but I think it makes you think about the human element. Would you be okay with a friend or family member being replaced with an AI that can perfectly replicate them?
there's a
Like,
horror movie plot for you right there.
well,
Horror
yeah, I mean,
movie, yeah.
it's something I'm playing with anyway. But it's like, would you be okay with that? Like hypothetically, like um, a partner dies and they can just carry on as AI, or even like let's not even go that bleak because that then you kind of can bring in the thing of like, oh, but that's difficult because there's the
Grief.
grief attached
Oh,
to the real
yeah.
person. But like, if you could literally just like, let's say someone moved away, um, and it's like, hey, uh, I'm gonna move away, so like, don't worry though, like my AI is just gonna chill with you. He's got all of our memories. He's got all of my personality. It'll be like I never left, and you guys can just carry on. Like, is that something that people would be okay with? Because I wouldn't. I don't think that's cool. Like, I think inherently the human connection, not just the facsimile of human connection. And like in this hypothetical, this AI is like perfect. It is your friend. It is spot on. It will hug you when you are sad. It will be your shoulder to cry on. It will hold your hand at weddings and funerals. It will be, your friend. It will be your friend and carry out all of the acts that a friend would do in emotionally supporting you through life. And in theory, have the emotional um, connection with you that an actual human friend does. And the only thing in this hypothetical that's different is that it's an AI. And it's like, would you be okay with that? And I would hazard a bet that most people would say no. Most people would be like, no, I want the person.
Well,
And that to me is like, well, so then the human element is important. It's not just an end result. It's not just an end product of enjoying something for the sake of it being there.
I see Fabulin coming in here, referencing on my Socrates thing earlier. Aristotle and Socrates had a pretty famous teacher and student relationship, and hated each other. So, of
Yeah.
course, I just cherry picked the one quote from Socrates because I think it's fun to point out that art forms have always been hazed
Yeah,
when
yeah.
they come out. Um,
Rock and roll got all of it out. It was
yeah,
video games for a while,
horror
and
video
then
games. Yeah.
horror, and now it's VR games because it's too close to reality. But that's the same thing they said about Manhunt 2 on Wii. Like, oh my god, you get to actually stab people, and it's like, well, not really. Like, that's not how it works. But whatever.
Yeah, well, the AI replica person. and I kind of joke like, well, there's a horror plot there. And I mean, this is a way deep cut reset to the very, very beginning of the show. Is you're never going to tell an original plot. It's
No,
that's what my professor told me.
everything's a remix.
Yeah, but you remixing that story of what we just talked about, that makes for a really good horror plot, right? Like, it's interesting because you moved it away from, like, the loved one, like a significant other or something like that, and it's and then Domir here and said, I think there's speculative fiction, and I'm like, well, we do have Pet Cemetery, and Final Girls, and it's all just like colliding, it's all interweaving in my head like a spider's web. How a story like that might unfold, how the grief element, how the selfishness of it. We the dead don't grieve us, we grieve the dead, right? Um a funeral isn't for the dead, it's for the people alive. It's these things like that that make me think that there is a story to be told about people who would have the AI replicant of this human, because that grief, because of that need to for closure or whatever it is. And of course, it being a horror movie, it would always go awry, and through that, we should theoretically interrogate the question of the premise of why we even made the movie, right? That's why we tell stories. We add that conflict to wonder, to ask questions. Not even always nice. I know some of my professors would tell me that you should always answer your premise, but I've always liked art that asks a question openly a little bit more than one that has an answer, personally. Um, and Yeah, I don't know. I think it's yeah, no, I think it's, yeah, like I said, where is he? Um, I want to talk to you about horror video games still, but we're creeping up
Yeah,
on
we went
on a
on
little
some
bit.
crazy tangents.
I want to get you out of here in about before your premiere. Everyone, by the way, right after my show, just go hop right on over to Dan's premiere here for some more wholesome Halloween hot sick action. Oh my god, I keep
Live in 1 hour with the premiere.
hot sick action. You want to take a quick 5-minute break in intermission, come back, talk a little bit about horror video games, and I'll get you on your way so you can get prepped for that.
Sure thing.
Is that cool? Or yeah?
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay, cool. The conversation is just so interesting. It's like, I gotta being a little selfish here, speaking of, because I want to keep talking to one of my idols. All right, checking. We'll be right back about 5 minutes. Rehydrate, let your dogs or pets out if they've been bugging you for a little bit. We'll be right back in about 5. And we're back. What is up, chat gang? Catching us in our third and final act here, I suppose, to use some film lingo. Still talking with Dan Drambles here. Internet icon and actual Skellington IRL.
Yeah, this is all just makeup. You rub it off and it's just the bones underneath. But then again, I suppose that's true of everybody.
Right. Yeah, I'm an alleged lich IRL who will become immortal through technomancy, my art and stuff. Yeah, so artificial intelligence, beautiful film. So yeah, we were talking about like AI and stuff like that. But to kind of reset it a little bit, so I have a bit of a chicken or the egg thing. I know my love of horror films came first because go a little bit like personal here, and I wonder if I often wonder how people could get into horror as a genre. It's to the point where I'm like, oh, what happened in your life that got you into horror? And then I've met people who aren't that stereotype, how many people are the pseudo goth kids or emos that got into, like I just like, oh wait, you meet people who aren't that stereotype, but me, I definitely am. My mom, who lost custody of me and so on and so forth, and I have like two good memories of her. Is watching the original Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th when I was way too young. Right, she would rent movies and play them, and that was like, we'd get Little Caesar before it was like take and bake pizza. They'd have this pizza called the Bigfoot, where it was just really long, and she'd order pizza, and pizza's still my favorite food to this day. And we'd get pizza and we'd watch a horror movie together. I'm like 3 or 4 years old, right? Like I'm way too young to be watching horror movies. My kid asked me, he's 10. He's like, can I finally watch Nightmare on Elm Street? Because I was Freddy Krueger one year. You see my Freddy Krueger mask, actually. There it is.
Oh, sick.
Yeah, I've got the actual metal claw, not sharpened because I'm not a weirdo like that. But
Yeah.
And I just, so like that. And then the other thing we shared was like pro wrestling. She'd
Love pro
always
wrestling.
regale me of stories of Andre the Giant and how she sat next to him at some event and how he sat on 2 chairs, and this is all the stuff.
Amazing. That's great.
But even besides that, like I was reading Goosebumps. I was getting into the stuff really young, and I started writing stories that always had a horror twist. I even the stories I try to write, wholesome, end up with some sort of facet of horror in them, whether it's like
Yeah.
a little too like go a little too heavy on like some description of some gore or something, go a little too heavy on the esoterica that puts you in that like dread. The good horror makes you feel dread, right? It's not even like
Yeah.
ooh scary, it's like the oh man, oh, and you just there's that vibe, that really good horror. But I also discovered horror video games kind of along that time, growing up alongside the original Nintendo. And as the games matured, I discovered, like, as we got out of the like really bad like licensed platformers, like the original Nightmare on Elm Street game, we started to get into like what Silent Hill was on the PS1, and
Yeah.
that game just captivated me. Like Resident
Yeah.
Evil was
It
fine.
still holds up.
Oh,
Silent Hill 1. I know everybody loves Silent Hill 2, and I mean Silent Hill 2 is my favorite thing of all time. I literally think it's the most perfect piece of work ever. I just think it's flawless. But Silent Hill 1,
0 notes, by the way, from me to you.
yeah, Silent Hill 1 is still just as atmospheric, just as absorbing, just as incredible as the day it came out. And I actually think it's aged well because of how aged it is. Because the games have this interesting quality, especially like the retro horror stuff. It's an abstraction of horror visuals through the low poly visuals capable with the tech at the time, creates these kind of interesting blank spaces where your mind fills in a lot of it.
Yes.
And well, you don't get that with the like more photorealistic stuff of the modern age. Not that there's not good stuff there as well, like the Resident Evil remakes have been killing it, but the
7's pretty damn good, right? Like,
and seven, oh, love 7 so much.
Yeah.
I feature that feature Resident Evil 7 in the Terabytes trailer I put together, maybe a little bit too much because I've got such an affinity for that game, and it has such great visuals.
They went back. I mean, Resident Evil to me has never been a survival horror game. It's always been a little bit more action horror.
Okay.
Yeah, you resource management, but around the time you get a shotgun and your tank controls go like this and the zombies' brains go off like that, you're like, yeah.
Did you play Resident Evil Remake, as in the original RE make? The GameCube?
Yeah.
That's survival hard. That's
sure. Yeah.
Like those Crimson Heads when they chase you, you are not shooting them down.
Notoriously throughout the whole series were always like you can shoot it, put it down, but just keep running, but Soma / what's the other game, Paranoia, these games are not until 7. That's you hide or you run away from everything and you have a gun to solve puzzles. Like it's but no, continue. Silent Hill, you're bang on. They even with Silent Hill 2, the Silent Hill 2 remake was less scary because they HDified the fog and how much heavy lifting the fog is
you mean
doing.
the HD collection? Because the remakes now, the HD collection.
Not the full on like remakes, but like re-releases. I
that
suppose
HD collection was awful.
Well,
I don't know how they messed it up so badly. Comic Sans on the fucking signboard. Comic Sans. How fucking dare you, sirs?
Yeah. Well,
I actually, to be fair, I criticize. I happen to know that the devs of that had some pretty for it just being being a re-release. I happen to know the devs were under some pretty horrendous, strenuous arm tie-in or whatever the phrase you want to apply to it is. So I can see. I'm not sure how certain things, like I really don't understand the Comic Sans stuff, but I can understand how it ended up as bad as it was. But yeah, it really just destroyed a piece of art.
I don't know if it's still relevant, but I shared the video games forum thing here. And
that is the most relevant. That is like the thing that we need people to fill in. Like we're hoping the trailer is going to make people go like, I need to sign this.
Silent Hill 2, by the way, was at the top of my list in that forum. I think I ripped Soma and then Faith, the Faith trilogy. This is a game made to look like an MS-DOS game.
Again, it's in our trailer. You'll have saw it popping up there.
It reminds me of, and I think part of it is it like VHS was basically horror sold. The reason VHS and VCRs lived, the whole idea of a home film taking off at all, when I know it's difficult to think of them as like against each other, you watch the movie in the theater and then you buy it. No, they used to be at odds with each other in the studio lot A era and stuff like that, where like we actually had antitrust laws come in and break up our movie theater empires, and how they had exclusive deals with certain studio lots and stuff like that. But at this time period where like having a VCR in your home was kind of foreign, the limited technology kind of made horror great. You think about like how congested the original Alien film feels when you watch it on a small CRTV compared to like you go and you see in this, it feels.
Yeah, I mean, I think doesn't H-Bomber guy have like a whole video about scan lines?
I think he does. Oh yeah, he does. Yeah. And how like there's new like horror. I think like how some games now have been trying to like put those scan lines back in and doing some stuff like that. Horror is just a resilient genre. It's great at it's just really great at using the medium. It just always has been. But yeah, so regarding video games and using the medium, I don't know which I love more, horror film or horror games, because the interactivity of horror games it does something to me.
But they're incomparable experiences. It's different formats, and I'm sure as somebody who's been on my channel a long time and watched a lot of my videos, you'll have heard us talk about you'll have heard us talk at length about format storytelling and how much that is like my jam. Like I'm I'm such a format storytelling nerd, and horror films use the format in an entirely different way to horror games use the format, and the smartest versions of both play to the strengths of the medium.
Right.
And so with films, it's a complete control over the composition of an image. So, like, I think of something like the jump scare from The Exorcist 3, one of the most famous and best jump scares of all time. And it has that crash zoom in, and it's sudden, and it lingers you on that big wide shot for so long. And it's just the complete meticulous control of the tension to the payoff to the way the camera moves and everything. It all feeds into the scene, and that specific moment could not be replicated in video games. But then video games will do stuff like, to pull a random example from my head, Ducky Ducky Literature Club has you
Oh my
rifling
God.
through your program files, and it kind of
Oh,
invades and breaks the fourth wall. And
Monica
that's
did
something
nothing
that
wrong.
that's
Fight me
something that can
IRL.
only and it's something that can only be achieved in video games. So I think it's like they're incomparable because they're different formats,
Oh
but
my
the
God.
best of both will
Monica did nothing
play with the
wrong.
format.
I too wondered why I couldn't romance her throughout the game. Speaking of some of my oldest videos and the algorithm, I I for my horror marathon that year, I was looking for games to play. Pretty poor, and Doki Doki Literature Club was like a free horror game.
Free.
Yeah, and so I downloaded, and that was one of those ones where and you said something in one of your recent Wholesome Halloween videos about how like all horror is a little self-aware. Like,
Yeah, I think it's all a little goofy. I think
yeah,
that might have been what I said. It's a little, like, it has to be, maybe use silly. And I think self-awareness kind of falls under that. I think any self-awareness is kind of, and yeah, I think it is like a little bit all self-aware at the same time.
but I think like horror, like buying into it a little bit, like that, like you have to like purchase your ticket to go watch a horror thing.
Yeah.
With Doki Doki Literature Club, half of the horror of that game was waiting for the horror. For me, it was sitting there, and I'm just like, okay, when's shit gonna get real? And that like, and reading every poem with this underlying like sinister tone to my audience, and being like,
Yeah, yeah.
and just like making everything sound weirder and creepier because it's a visual novel. It's, you're using that format, and I'm just like, and I'm like, if I didn't know this was a horror game, there is a good moment where you're like, oh shit, but
Yeah,
that
it's a horror
whole
game.
first,
But up till then, if you didn't know, it's interesting because I almost like when it came out, I understand the need for content warnings, and particularly with that game, it's quite important.
it's pretty
But I
troubling.
was almost like, when I first started, I was almost like, the content warning does kind of spoil this one because it
Mm.
pretends to be something that wouldn't need a content warning. The very fact that they have a content warning makes you go like, oh, it's going to do something different. It's gonna switch up on us because this does not seem like a game that's going to go down those avenues. And I thought at the time, like, oh, does this spoil it a little bit? But it really doesn't, because even knowing that you're going into something horror, it's the waiting for the other shoe to drop, and you're like scrutinizing things and being like, when's it gonna
Yeah,
get weird? When's
yeah.
it gonna get strange? What's happening? What's gonna go on? And then obviously, when it does happen, you're like, oh, not at the point I thought it would.
Well, like there's where you're writing your own poems, right? And you don't. I didn't initially realize, and the UI tells you, but I didn't initially realize that like I was writing the poem, and it was kind of like picking which person I was romancing type thing.
Yeah.
So like my first few poems pushed me in a certain direction, but also I was writing them with like the audience feedback, and that's the nature of like a why I like streaming, is that live, interaction, especially in a game like Doki Doki Literature Club, is really good for a live audience, because you have that sort of like you're functioning on three layers of interaction with the art. I'm playing it, my audience is watching me play it, and I'm interacting with them to then play the game. And
Oh, you are really, it's not a game, but you're really gonna enjoy episode 30 of Wholesome Halloween this year.
look at
If
that.
you like layered levels of
Oh, I love
meta, yeah.
yeah, I love meta. Well, I mean, it's I don't know if something can be too meta. Like
I think
we live in a
people use
oh,
the
go ahead.
phrase too meta when they mean bad meta.
Right, and that's the thing, is like it's whether something is meta or not is not a value judgment, thing good, thing bad. It's like parasocial relationship doesn't mean good or bad. You can exploit a parasocial relationship for everyone's money, like and subscribe, folks. Or or go give to Trans Lifeline. Get the link from your thing here. Real quick.
It's just on any YouTube video. If you just put up a YouTube video, the donation button will be there.
Oh, hey, look, the gripping tension of Mike Flanagan's Hush.
There you go. That'll do.
And yeah, but that's thing like meta. It's like someone's like it's too meta, and they often mean it as a negative thing. And I'm like, I don't know if that's the criticism for why it's bad. There are ways in which you can do bad meta, right? Like some of the later Screams got a reputation for being too meta, and I'm like, are they really?
I don't think so.
I feel
I actually think if we're going to go down the lines of something that's too meta, and by that I mean bad meta, I actually think a lot of the MCU's kind of smug, winking at the camera of like,
Disney films
we know
in
this
general.
is stupid. Oh, what are we going to
Well,
do?
it's-
Put on this silly costume? Whoa, like wink, wink.
Well, it's lampshading is
That
what it is. It's
but
yeah,
it's
go ahead.
meta, but it's lampshading in a very
Lampshading is the technique, the meta technique being used, right?
yeah,
Like
and it's very self-referential in a way that's self-depreciating, but it's
yes,
not honestly sincerely self-depreciating because they're kind of doing something different while saying how silly that thing that was before. So it kind of becomes
feel like
self-indulgent and sort of patting themselves on the back.
I also feel
And
like
I'm
you
not
mock
knocking the
your audience,
MCU.
don't you?
Yeah,
Like, I
yeah,
think you
you're
also kind of
mocking the
mock your
core
audience at
audience.
that point.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're like I love this shit when what was wrong with that stuff? You know, like
yeah.
let's pretend that we're not all nerds who like I am a connoisseur of bad taste. Don't get me. I
Mm.
love garbage. So you don't need to like rib me while I'm sitting in the audience with you and mock
Yeah.
the purple underwear. Like I get it. I'm good. Um, but no, like video games like that. I mean, they kind of. It's interesting how playing a video game we sort of sell stuff on the horror aspect of the video game, and I wonder what that does. Doki Doki Literature Club is a brilliant because I wonder if I didn't have it suggested to me by somebody in my audience, I wonder if the content warning alone would have done the same thing.
Mm.
Where I was playing through it with this like extra suspense I wouldn't have had. You know, where I was reading every line, or like we had this joke in my audience where like anytime the character was like would like get a little too thirsty, we'd be like almost touching a girl, and like we just like would make these gags and stuff, and then when we're like, oh, that actually, you know, it's just like that hits really gross, and you start reading these extra layers into it. And once more, Monica did nothing wrong is actually the real moral of the story. She is the ultimate AI bae. I didn't fix the game's like log file for the longest time. I would just log in and hang out with Monica on my on my like second monitor for a little while. And I have a Monica keychain somewhere that one of
Nice.
my friends got me because they've heard my Monica rant. And it's interesting how that like there's a little idiosyncrasy there with AI conversation earlier, video games and Monica as an AI, because that's really she becomes self-aware that
Yeah.
she's an AI in a video game.
Yeah.
You know, is this where stories are going? So I gotta ask as we kind of like move to wrap up here, and I let you go so you have some time to maybe eat if you need to and get to your live premiere that everyone in chat gang is definitely going to go because I've been like spamming links this whole time.
Yeah. I mean, like literally, like I am good, like right up till like 5 to 10.
Oh,
Like,
then I'll just talk to you all the way through. What are I gotta ask the question I hate the most, and then you asked me with a survey. So turnabout's fair play. What are your 3 favorite horror games?
Silent Hill 2 is undoubtedly there.
It's just a shame.
It's a bit of a lesser known one and a less celebrated one, but I love a game called Yuppie Psycho, which, if for those not familiar with it, it is an independent game that really, to me, should have blown the fuck up. It should have been huge. Like it should have been it should be kind of one of like the trifectas of indie horror, like right up there with like Puppet Combo and Faith and stuff. Because it was doing something that was, I thought, really interesting and different in that it was a satirical office horror. And the satire in it was like Oh, it was spot on. So you basically, I'm giving this a lot more attention than I am Silent Hill 2 because everybody knows what Silent Hill 2 is.
Yeah.
But with
Yeah.
Yuppie Psycho, so you basically play as this guy called Brian, and he gets a job at this massive corporation, and he turns up and he has no fucking clue what he's doing. Like he has no idea why he's there.
Relatable.
He doesn't really know that exactly. But it's about it uses horror as an avenue to explore these kind of systems of corporate unnecessity. That's not a word. Like a lack of
Superfluousness. Yeah. Like
yeah. And I'm very familiar with it. I've just done a video for a client, and like, oh my god, there was so many people like would have meeting after meeting after meeting to tell me like, oh, should we change the shade of green on that lower third to a very slightly unnoticeably different shade of green, and would have like 2 hour long meetings to discuss this. And it's killer. And it was very much this kind of thing of like people like almost doing jobs to justify that they have a job as opposed to having any purpose behind the jobs. And it's that in game form, but explored through horror. So he gets to this job. He has no idea why he's there, what he's applying for, but he's so desperate for a job, he's applied and he's got an offer. So he comes up for an interview, and he goes to the office where he's supposed to have the interview, and it's just an acceptance letter that, hey, you got the job. And by the way, you're a witch hunter. And he's like, what? Like, what do you mean I'm a witch hunter? And he kind of just plays him going through his day to day at the office, like not just being a witch hunter, but literally working out what the fuck that even means. Like, is there a witch? Like, who's what?
am
And
I
like you're
the
talking,
witch?
yeah. And then you talk as you sort of like navigate the NPCs and all that, and you sort of talking to them, you realize like fundamentally nobody knows what they're doing there. But I mean in a very literal sense, like almost like the office complex becomes this kind of weird purgatory where everybody just has to be there, but nobody understands why or what their role is or what they're doing. But they just turn up in a suit and they go to their desk and they type in the numbers. It's kind of actually, it's
It's like Office Space meets Stanley Parable, like
yeah,
in
it's
hell.
kind of like Severance a little bit, if you've seen that, where they're putting the numbers into the computer, but they're like, that's just their job, but they don't actually know what their job is.
Yeah.
It's a weird game. It's really awesome. I really, really love it. Third, this is where we get difficult because it depends on what you class as horrors.
Whatever you like. I like this is where I did like I think I referenced Thought Slime once live, but we certainly mentioned them offline. They've got their like sister channel Scaredy Cats, and one of the
Yeah,
first videos is like what is horror. I
yeah.
I like that very liberal classification of horror. It's
Okay, well, if we're going like, it depends on your definition of horror then, but if we're going like the very loose definition, so it doesn't need to be, a survival horror or like intend to scare, Castlevania Symphony of the Night, easy. Which is why I was such admiring your statue earlier. So it's that kind of thing of like Castlevania Symphony of the Night, nobody's going to play that game and get scared.
It's
Like
got spooky
it's not,
shit in it though.
but it is gothic horror aesthetic to perfection. And it's just a fucking perfect Metroidvania. It's just flawless. It's so good. So, but then if you want us to replace that with something that's like more specifically horror, then like I can take steps. I can say like, well, it's Bioshock horror because it's definitely like more
It's
scary,
got
but
that.
it is
It's
still
got that
Metroidvania.
atmosphere to it. Yeah.
Yeah, so
I
like
wouldn't.
Bioshock. I mean, I've got the Bioshock chains tattooed on us.
I've got my
The
Bioshock shot glasses up there behind Tifa.
nice. But yeah, so and then like if you
First
want to go,
Bioshock Infinite.
but then
I
if you want
only
to go,
dislike it in the last act, and that's where for me it all falls apart. I think you can tell Ken Levine just kind of
oh
got
yeah, when they're
got
like,
tired of.
it's
Well,
like really good for a period, and then they're like, what
they
if the people who are being oppressed are just as bad as the
well,
oppressors
it's in it.
because they're both fighting? And it's like, Ken, what you
He gets
doing?
so full of his own shit, and then it commits the cardinal sin. It explains everything, and
Mm.
it's just like Don't do that. I don't need to know. I don't need to know that like how you make my ice cream. I just want the fucking ice cream. I don't need to know about like the crumb and just give me the ice cream. Don't insult my intelligence. I would rather think about what it might mean than be told something way lamer. I mean, it goes into like the horror thing where with Silent Hill 1, it leaves that the not everything explained, not everything explored makes it scarier, right?
Yeah.
Like uh, adventure stories turns out works the same way too. Also, BioShock Infinite has a jarring tonal issues. You can tell it started out one game and it became a different game too. You know,
Totally. Just a
sorry.
message there. I noticed. What did I make of Bandersnatch? I like it, but it's like a trepidatious like. It's like I like it, but I feel like I've seen it / played it / done it before. But on the other hand, I think Charlie Brooker, who wrote it, even acknowledges, because he got lots of messages being like, I've played this before. And he's like, yeah, I know. But you didn't play it as a Netflix original. Like that's the thing. I'm taking old adventure game formats and putting it in front of people who don't play old classic choose your own adventure game PC clicker point and click games and the narrative branch and paths of those games, those old type in, I want to pick up sword and all that. Like he just put that into a different format. So I can respect, like it's sort of nothing new, but I can respect that it's nothing new because while it's nothing new, it is in a new format. I do think it kind of loses itself in the third act. I think it had a really unique and interesting gimmick, a really unique and interesting feel, a really nice sort of grounded British aesthetic. I like that it sort of tied in with like the game development, really kind of homaging the games that it came from. I didn't get an ending, and I think I saw them all because obviously there's multiple ends in it. I didn't never get an ending where I was like, oh yeah, it's landed there. It feels like conceptually, its first 2/3 are pretty well executed, and then the kind of had the idea and let it get away with them, and then the sort of had nowhere to go with it.
That's the I mean that's the multi-ending video game conundrum in a nutshell is narratives tend to tighten up near the end.
Yeah.
Like, and when you're writing multiple endings, works for Silent Hill, by the way, because they know that they write it with this is the ending in mind.
Yeah,
and
totally.
the others
And
are
then
just
you can
kinda,
do the silly dog ending afterwards. You know what I mean?
yeah. So like but a lot of other games kind of fail, and the worst video games are so in on their. I know we're considering this more of a film, but the worst video game endings are the ones where the whole game is written nebulously because it has no idea if you're going to be playing the good or the bad throughout it all. BioShock is fine because it's really polar. There's two. You either eat a baby or you don't.
Yeah.
And spoiler, if you eat a baby, you get the bad ending. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't eat a baby, you get the good ending? Question mark.
Yeah, it's an interesting writing conundrum though, because like for me, I always think like when I'm writing something and when I see things where like the end nails it, I'm like, this could only have one ending.
Right.
Like this is the ending that this narrative deserves. This is the ending it was leading to. Like you watch something like Back to the Future, there's no other way that film could end. There's not. If you change the ending,
trilogy, even like the trilogy,
yeah,
nice
if you change the ending, it literally can only make that film worse. Like there's no other ending. And I know it's very simple kind of narrative, especially now since we've evolved so much from it. But like the statement stands, it has one ending. And like, yeah, like I'll write stuff and I'm like, well, there's only one way this can end. There's only one way this can end. And I feel like in a lot of games that give you that choice of multiple endings, like you say, Silent Hill works, and it does work because it's very apparent. Like this is the ending we're going to have you aim for and get probably on your first run. this is the ending, the others are superfluous fun. But then other games will kind of like not push you in one specific direction and then offer you the multiple endings. And it's like, it's always obvious to me. The best example is Life is Strange. Is like, there's one ending to this thing, and you did not give a shit about the other one. Like, it's like there is one ending where this game was meant to go, and there is other endings you can use.
Town gets riggedy wrecked or doesn't.
Yeah. I take you played all of Silent Hill. Not Silent Hill, Life is Strange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I actually really enjoyed it. I know that there was some. I like that's one of those games where I actually like the story of. I feel the story of how it came to be enhances it. Essentially, the developers were shopping it around for a publisher, and the only publisher that didn't want to gender swap the main character was Square Enix. They were the only ones who were like, "Oh no, keep your story as is." And so that's why Square Enix is the one that published this like unlikely adventure game during that sort of like Telltale Games.
And that's why you get the weird Final Fantasy Spirits Within plug within it.
Right.
Did you catch that?
Right.
When she looks at the TV and she's like, Final Fantasy Spirits Within, what a classic. And you're like, what?
The only mistake that movie ever made was being called Final Fantasy. It should have just been called like The Spirits Within, and it would have been fine. It would have been fine.
It's a bizarre film.
Alien meteorite infects the planet with turbo ghosts. I'm about it.
Aesthetically, it's such an interesting artifact of its time now as well. But then you get the end of that game, and it's like, hey, make this major choice. And I made the choice that my character would, not necessarily the one that would give us the most cathartic ending, because I was playing as a character. I'm not playing in pursuit of.
You were Max. You weren't Dan.
Yeah, and sometimes with stories, you have to make your characters suffer a little bit or not give them the thing that they want. But I had the option as Max to get the thing I wanted. And like that ending is just like, and they drive off into the sunset wordlessly, and it's just like nothing. It's like, what? And then the other ending has like whole monologues and performances and emotional catharsis, and it's like, well, there was one ending to this game. This did not have two endings.
I wonder if I don't know the devs and their intimacy. I wonder if that wasn't a case of it actually had one ending, but then
I think budget probably played into it, and budget constraints as well.
Yeah. I mean, that's the practical side of all storytelling, regardless of medium, right? Like, it's just we are humans with time to make things, and unfortunately, even passion projects often require dosh. So it's spoken your native language, by the way, as far as I understand it.
I don't think I've used the phrase dosh in. I was going to say in like 10 plus years, but I think maybe in my life. But I appreciate the attempt to.
Killing Floor has taught me many words.
To be honest, it's more of a London thing. To be honest, funny enough, even though obviously we use pounds, if I'll say to people how you got the dollar. So I'm like, I use dollar to refer to like money, but I don't know if that's just a me thing. Like dollar, not spelt with an R, DOLLA.
When I talk to my Australian friends, being related to the Warhammer community, I have a huge Australian audience because they love fucking Warhammer. I always call them dollary dues. I don't.
Dollary dues.
And yeah, how many dollary dues did that army cost you? And as far as I know, dollary dues is the actual currency.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah, so
that's the currency.
No, it's just dollars. but it's funnier that way. 1 sec, I'm going to take off my hoodie because I'm getting a little toasty. See, now I thought it would be like a little bit of a hard flex to wear my own hoodie merch on my show. And I'm like, oh, that's weird. But wearing two versions of my own merch in the other colors. So that one's in the classical Castlevania colors scheme. And then this one in my vaporwave. So I wonder, have you played Devotion? By Red
the side scroll is it the one that got banned in
soft banned
China? Soft banned in China.
In America. It was banned in China, and then it was soft banned in in
Was
the
it the one
US.
with the controversy with the
I will.
Winnie the Pooh thing?
Yes.
Yes, then yes, I'm familiar.
Okay. It's probably one of the best horror games I've played in recent memory. I answered the survey, by the way, that everyone in Chat Gang should also be answering right now.
Absolutely, it will help us. It will help me get literally a dream film made with in a multi-million-dollar franchise. So yeah, please answer that survey.
Yeah, yeah. But I answered that, and basically my top three is impossible. So I did like I go off of recency bias,
Yeah.
to split hairs. Um, it's it's really good
Mm.
and I do recommend it. It's sort of standard survival horror game. Um, what it does really interestingly is I'm not certain there is a fail state up until one specific point in the game, but you're still and I'm pretty desensitized when it comes to horror. I
Mhm.
found myself hesitant to like go into the next room and the
Yeah.
next room.
Yeah.
Uh, and like were this a movie, I'd probably have watched it unflinchingly, But as a video game, like in the way that like video games like sort of like you talked about this with you were playing Dan in Life is Strange. You were playing Max, right?
Yeah.
I find that like sort of like self-insert quality to video games kind of affects the psychology of horror and the story that we're
Yeah.
consuming. And I don't have any science or education in this to back it up. I'm just a liar on the internet, making things up.
Well, I mean, I've got a friend who is literally a horror video game academic, so they would back you up. So
Metal.
because they have a very similar stance, and they study VR development.
Metal. Your friend is awesome. Let them know a stranger on the internet says so. Um, yeah, but like that, this game that I might normally consume unflinchingly, the really good horror when it's put together well, the environment is so much a part of the gameplay, right? Not, I don't think any filmmaker takes a shot for granted. When
No.
everything they put in a scene is there for a reason.
Yeah.
Um, but with a video game, it's that in three dimensions. And when you have a game where the main gameplay mechanic is exploration, taking the time to stare in the corner is part of the game, right? Like and so the way it populates the game with these details. And what's funny about it is like I said, I don't think there's a fail state, but there's certainly moments where I'm playing this game and I like turn. I'm like, I don't want to, not looking over there, and yet now I'm forced to look at this like I don't know this dead fish or something, right? I'm like,
Yeah.
and the way the game plays with that is so fantastic. It's
Did you ever play Fear Assessment?
I don't believe I've played that one. Is that the indie?
It's an indie game. It's an itch.io big one.
No, I need
So
to play this one.
the premise of Fear Assessment is it kind of does that fourth wally breaky thing, format storytelling, where it purports to be a legitimate government test on fear. So when you're playing the game, it just feels like you're taking a test, but the test is on the topic of fear.
Hmm.
And I'm pretty sure it's Fear Assessment. I can't, but I think that's the game where it's like play this with headphones as because it's a test, it's a government test. It's like control your variables and control your environment. The environment they want you to test in is you have to play it with headphones while facing away from an open door in the dark. And that's kind of like the opening text is like you have to do this.
Look, I have
I'm sure that's
CPTSD.
Fear Assessment. I know there is a game that tells you like play with headphones in the dark with your door open behind you. I'm sure it's Fear Assessment. But,
I have I have CPTSD from like trauma and stuff.
hmm.
I physically IRL can't sit with my back to a door, without
Wow.
my
Yeah.
anxiety like amping up. Because when I didn't know where the violence was going to come from, so like I
Yeah.
have to.
Maybe don't do that for
I
Fear
won't do
Assessment.
that
Maybe
portion. I won't do
maybe
that portion. Well,
ignore that instruction.
and that's the interesting thing is because like we carry our baggage into horror and stuff like that, and I view horror as cathartic. Like I'm fighting
Yeah.
my demons. I'm playing against my demons. I'm even if the and I like to it's very important that I stress to folks when I say horror from the place of empathy, that doesn't mean horror that is happy. it can be some of the darkest shit you'll ever watch, like The Babadook. That film is about grief, and in particular, this mom's inability to love her fucking kid. Whether the
Yeah,
monsters in that film or not is practically tertiary to like the real dread of it,
totally.
right? And that's by no means a happy movie, but I still
No.
think it comes from a place of empathy for the character, is in particular the mom, right?
Yeah, that's the thing for me. You can put your characters through as much like awful trauma as you want, but you have to like not carry a maliciousness for them. Horror loses itself for me when it physically has contempt for its characters.
Yes,
That's
that's
when I kind of like lose
why I couldn't
interest
like
in it.
Midsummer.
So it's like if you look at what's a good example? The Descent. The Descent is very bleak, very, very bleak, and it puts its characters through relentless, relentless torture.
Mhm.
But even though it's far more brutal than something like Cabin Fever, and it's far crueler to its characters, I feel like it's on its character's side more than something like Cabin Fever,
Yes.
or more than a lot of films that have contempt for the characters. I don't think the filmmakers hate their characters within that movie. I don't think they want them to suffer. I think the story requires them to suffer, but it's not out of a desire to see them suffer. And I think you get that from The Descent because of how much they allow the women to really fight. Like, and it doesn't end well for them, but like they give them like the chance to really, really like push back against it. When then you look at something like Cabin Fever and everybody's just an awful person and everybody's awful and then they'll all meet an awful fate.
I that controversial opinion from Mephisto here, clickbait. I don't like Midsummer for basically that reason. I found every character in it to be deserving of their heinous fate. And
I would disagree with that sentiment, but
really,
I get where you're coming from, but I
I
would
just
disagree with the
the
sentiment.
the boyfriend, I'm just like, like
The
yeah, he's
boyfriend's an asshole. An
yeah,
asshole, yeah.
like, and that's their big like, their big moment. You have the like, you have the we don't even watch the one friend die on screen. It's just it's a comfort watch. I don't want to. That's where, like I said, controversial opinion. I know this movie is like kind of universally beloved, and it's like I couldn't vibe with it, and
So
I don't like the negativity. I don't like talking about stuff I don't
sure.
like. As a rule, which I think is
So I think it's interesting actually that you. I'm not going to like say like your opinion's wrong or anything.
no,
That's
no,
not
no,
what
no. It's
not the
fine. This
point I'm
is
trying to
a
make.
conversation, not a
But
debate. It's
I
all right
think
to
I
disagree.
think it's interesting that you think the characters are deserving of their fate because I think that is to me the opposite message of the film,
Interesting.
but very much the message of the cult. A lot of people come away from that movie being like, yay, girl power, the boyfriend deserved it. And they, to me, are seduced by the cult as much as the characters, as her character is. Because you should not, as awful as the boyfriend was, and he does
You
suck, and I
shouldn't
think
want
it
him to
really
die, right?
touches,
Like that's a
yeah, it really does touch on a very realistic um and often underrepresented like relationship dynamic that I see a lot of time in a lot of people in a way where you're like you kind of want to be like, oh
get out of
dude,
that fucking
that's get
relationship.
out of that place for you. Like, and it's very gaslighty, it's very dismissive. And he's awful, and he's awful, 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 and he's not good for her, and he literally makes her life worse. But
And
without being so blatant as to be like, get back in the kitchen or I'll beat you over the head, which a lot of
very,
like,
yeah, they go
yeah,
overt, right?
which a
Like
lot of like domestically toxic relationships are depicted as in films because it's an easy way to express
identify.
that
Yeah,
people are.
it's
Yeah.
the
Like
hyperbole of it makes it
yeah,
obvious.
you watch it chapter 2 and like the husband is like horrendously abusive. And I'm not saying that abuse doesn't exist, but it's just like it's almost like shorthand visual language of like this is a bad guy, whereas he is a more is more of a realistic bad guy that I think a lot of dudes are without even realizing they are. I've seen people be that guy in a relationship
Yeah, and then
and
do
they're
all
just
this.
like, I don't get it. Like, she's so emotional. And it's just like, dude, you fucking suck and you're treating her like shit.
Yeah, and then all their friends are on their side, which the film does certainly set up, which is the twist of irony in the end is she essentially replaces the bad toxic relationship for a toxic relationship with a whole cult, and so it's not a yay victory woman
Yeah,
power.
and Homofabulin in the chat is just kind of touched on it. People who suffered abuse are drawn to cults because the rules are comforting. You know how to stay safe in that environment. That is absolutely true because cults target vulnerable people, and
See, I do.
she's a vulnerable person within that narrative.
You've got the video game psychologist friend. I have a friend who is a psychologist who helps people deprogram from cults, and we've had some
Holy
really
shit, that's so cool.
it's
That's
he's
awesome.
thinking of
Like
finally getting
horrifying that, but like
yeah.
amazing work.
We have some really cool conversations, but and it's like the way a cult essentially strips down your identity initially,
Yeah,
then they remove your relationships, and it's very cults follow this pretty straightforward pattern and until like you're in it and they take out your like support group so you can't get to anyone to pull you out of the cult. Like they've already broken down your identity, replace your name, tell you you're a goddess, right? Like they do these things where they disassociate your identity from yourself, like it change how you look, make you dress, like it they do all these things until they've essentially, and it's usually gradual, it's by degrees, and it's just yeah, it's gnarly. But yeah, cult drama. It's weird that I use a lot of cults as villains and stuff I write. But it's just, no, yeah. The rules can be comforting. They tell you how to live day to day, especially if you're like a broken human. You know, I don't mean
mhm,
this as a negative or pejorative. It's like if you go through bad stuff and you're looking for a lifeline or a rope, it can be really you don't know how to get out of bed each morning, and you have this initially you don't realize it's a cult and they don't present themselves as this self-help crystal guide friend, right? Tells you, well, each morning you get up and you start by doing this thing, and then
yeah,
after that, and you get these, well, I'm doing this for me, I'm doing this to, and then by the time you're sort of down the path, you've changed your name or you've gotten rid of your clothes, and the real
yeah,
problem with cults is there's often someone within that network directly benefiting from it and
yeah,
not doing all the culty stuff themselves.
yeah,
This is
yeah,
like Tom
and
Shinrikyo and all these like, you know,
yeah,
yeah,
and
go ahead.
yeah, and I think Midsummer is such an interesting film because so many people come away from it thinking it's a good for her movie.
Hmm.
Um, and it's like, no, that ending is horrifying. That ending is awful. And the fact that you think it's a good for her moment because she smiles at the end, you have fallen for the cult's trap. You have fallen for this belief that like, oh, this is better for her somehow, and it's not. And
Well, they
yeah,
even
he
gamify her being the winning one. Like they gamify it, which should be even more horrifying. Like horrifying, you know, from a you know, more of the third, fourth, fifth wave feminism. Like women shouldn't be the prize, right? Like
yeah,
she's gamified too. She's a trophy,
yeah,
which is the opposite of what we're, you know, to the point where they punish the other guy who doesn't get the woman that works, right? Like it's I felt it was pretty explicit in the this wasn't good. Like I said, I just didn't care for the characters. Like I just
yeah.
I
That's fair.
go ahead.
But yeah, and then the other thing that's interesting about it is like the cult is, and this is a thing, something that people really don't pick up on until uh, maybe like third or fifth watch, or maybe even not ever. The cult's a Nazi cult. The cult is a bigoted, like extremely right wing, like horrendous cult. There's like signage alluding to like heavy racism within the cult,
Well, their treatment of the
and
I only know him as that guy
are you
from
going to say From the Good Place? Yeah,
Chidi or whatever it is.
Chidi
Yeah.
Chidi Anagonye. Yeah,
Yeah. And their regard of him versus like the far the far less capable boyfriend man who just like gets the win for showing up and stealing all of the work and labor of Chidi. Like
yeah. And the cult has like it's obviously like it's disguised because it's kind of in a foreign language, but it has lots of like there's lots of like slogans on the walls and stuff that allude to like pure whiteness and stuff. It's like a white supremacy cult. Um, and like you ignore all of that because it's like, oh well, you know, girl boss, she gets rid of a gaslighty boyfriend, and yeah, her getting rid of a gaslighty boyfriend
Who gets lit
is
on fire?
yeah, I was going to
Good.
say is a win for her. It's great, that is a good thing, but not within the context of him being, you know, he's raped. Like people completely skim
He's
over that
drugged.
part. Like he is not deserving of be like no matter what he does, he's not deserving of that. He's not deserving of being raped and then burned alive.
No.
And yeah, and everybody's just like way and like celebrating. And I'm like,
Girl
you
boss,
are,
foghorn.
yeah, you fell for the illusions. And
And
I think it's interesting.
of course, that is the perfect note to end on, is talking about Midsummer and some of the ickiness of it, because you do
Very
have.
icky movie, but I think good icky, but I don't judge anybody for disliking it. I
Well,
totally
no,
get
and
that.
that's how I feel about like. I feel that way about a lot of art. Like, you usually don't have to justify to me what you enjoy. Like I said, I'm a connoisseur of bad taste. I love, I can write love letters to Big Trouble in Little China and how great of a film that is from a technical standpoint, right? But that's because I like bad stuff too, and so just don't pay bad people directly money, pay good people directly money, like Dan Drambles, by supporting his content.
Or support Trans Lifeline, more importantly, because that's this month's project. Get your
Right.
donations in.
Yeah. So I'm gonna drop another link just here to a random
Uh,
video.
you could just stick up the premiere page will be live. Drop a link to that,
Yep.
and
Yep.
then I'll see people there in literally 5 minutes.
Yeah. Hey, you're the one who said you go up to 5 minutes. So I abused this
Oh
this
yeah, no,
honor.
that wasn't a criticism. I was saying like because here's the thing: because if we'd stopped it 20 minutes ago, I would not have had enough time to start anything, but it would have been too late to start anything, too early to do the premiere. So I would have just been twiddling my thumbs,
In No Man's
waiting for the
Land.
premiere to
Yeah.
start. So I was
Yeah.
like, might as well do it straight up till 5.
Yeah. Right on.
Um,
Right on. So chat gang, please hop on over to Dan Drambles. If you're catching the VODs back, again, check out his content. It's great. It really is. I like that we ended on a contentious point too, by the way, because I I've, I very much think we are quite aligned in our, I call it like horror with empathy. I've got hope
yeah,
punk and stuff like that, and yet we still have these sort of like approach angles that are different, and I think
mm,
that's fantastic. So yeah,
totally.
check out his content. Thank you so much for being on the show. This was
Oh, my
awesome.
pleasure. It was awesome. It was great fun.
Yeah, and yeah. So I'll let you go. Chat gang, thanks for watching. Remember, you're the show within the show. The reason I do this thing. Remember to drink your milk, pay your taxes, be excellent to yourself. Yeah, be excellent to yourselves and each other, and I'll catch you next time.